Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is once again a Tuesday. You somehow made it to another one of those. It's July 7th, 2026. This is the Jeff Gerstmann Show. I'm Jeff Gerstmann. I'm here to discuss with you what's been going on in the world of video games. It's fucked. There you go. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll be back next week to do it again. We'll take the temperature and see what's going on. It's, I don't know, the last 7 days have been remarkably fucked up. In surprise, some ways you knew was coming and some ways you did not. But here we are. But I don't know. We'll get to the news. In me messing around with new things department, Rhythm Heaven Groove was released for the Nintendo Switch, and it's fantastic. It's a great Rhythm Heaven game. I'm having a lot of fun with it. The kids got way into it, which I was not expecting because they are not. You know, my oldest is 6, and my boy in the middle is 4, and they're not, like, rhythm is not really their thing yet. They're not, you know, my daughter did some dancing. She had her pre-ballet recital, and that went off fine. She's like, you know, she's picking it up, and you know, can kind of follow the instructions and what have you. Of the dance that she learned and then did, and there's obviously rhythm involved in that, but, like, you know, we have like a little electronic drum, and, you know, there's stuff that you just go like, you know, here's how you play, here's how you kind of play the drums, and, like, you know, it's not really you know, they haven't really gotten there yet. But Rhythm Heaven is I dare I say it, I think it might be teaching them the concepts. I don't know if they'll be able to apply those concepts immediately, but, you know, it seems like it's creating a framework for them to do things rhythmically. They're having some trouble with some of the harder levels. They're playing a lot of the multiplayer stuff, which is hit or miss, to be honest. There's some stuff where it's like you're playing volleyball, but you're kind of just rhythmically bouncing a ball back and forth between two sides. There's a tennis game that's relatively similar. And yeah, I don't know. They've both got their own save, and they've both been kind of playing through the campaign stuff. And so I've mostly been experiencing it that way. I played through the first tier myself on my save, and then I have mostly been stepping in to fill in when they can't get anything, when they can't finish a thing. And so I've basically been, like, randomly just playing levels out of context, out of order. Inside of Rhythm Heaven Groove, and really enjoying it. It's interesting to see the series on a device that can be hooked up to a television, which is, you know, not something that happens every day, because they did have to fill it full of you know, like, hey, latency adjustments and all the sort of stuff that you have to deal with when you're making a modern rhythm game. But when you fire it up when you're not when you're, you know, in handheld mode, it just kind of says, like, hey, yeah, I mean, if you ever are going to play on a TV, this is the screen you need to go to do that. Like, okay. But I've been playing it on TV, and they've been playing it handheld. It's been fine either way. You know, I think, you know, that's depending on your setup. It doesn't seem like it lets you manually adjust the latency. It's just more like hey, we're going to put a thing on screen, and you hit the button in time to the thing, and it makes the adjustments that way. And it seems to work fine. I don't know. I have not had any issues getting medals and perfects both on a television and in handheld mode. And I, you know, hey, it's another. Here it is. It's another great game in the Rhythm Heaven series. Which is everything I wanted it to be. It has a. It reads to you. It has a kind of, you know, screen reader sort of voice. And at the beginning, it asks you what sort of screen reading you want. If you want it to be silent, if you want full audio descriptions of what's on the screen, or if you just want it to read the text. And it's just kind of weird that they didn't record actual VO for it. It's just kind of strange. because it mispronounces some things, and it even says like, I'll try my best. Like it's a little girl and she's the screen reader, and I couldn't turn her off because when you go into the screen, when she asks you how much screen reading do you want, and when you turn it off, she's sad. She's very sad, and I was like, oh man, all right. It can stay on. It can stay on. The screen reading can stay on. You can say beat every so often. It'll be fine. But yeah, it's a hell of a game. And I as a longtime fan of the Rhythm Heaven franchise, as a longtime fan of the Rhythm Heaven franchise, there are games in this that are fine, but I think maybe not reaching the tip top of rhythm games that have been in previous entries in the series. And it is holding pretty close to the blueprint, the original formula. Like when you play these levels, and the song structure, the song structure as it relates to what you do. Most of the games in this have like 2, sometimes 3 different patterns, and you need to learn those. And then it has audio callouts that let you know what's coming next. And the way it uses those, how often, like if you've played enough of these, you know what's coming next. You almost don't need some of the guidance, because you just go like, yeah, okay, yeah, I know, I understand. Now it's going to be the B rhythm, and then we're going to go back to the A rhythm a few times, then we're going to do the B, and it is comfortable in that way. And seeing a series of new games that are built on this formula, I think is pretty fantastic. I've been having a really good time with it, so keep that in mind. That is out now. I have also been playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. This is in a weird state of limbo right now, where there are a bunch of streams going on. There's not a lot of reasons to really get into the specifics of embargo requirements and what have you. It's rare that it comes up, but for this one, it is actually a wide swath of the game that streamers can be streaming. Like I could be streaming that game right now up to like sequence 4 or something. It's like hours of the early game, along with some of the side stuff and whatever. But the thing that they made very clear is that it's not to, you're not to be giving impressions about what you're playing, which I don't understand how you can. I don't understand how you can play a game for any major length of time without commenting on what you're doing. And my guess is they're not actually policing that super strong, because so many people are streaming it. And like I said, like the streaming embargo for that part of the game is up. It was up yesterday. I've got a video up on YouTube of the first, not the first, but it's about a half hour of it. And then I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do a bunch of long stuff about this, because I want to talk about the game. So I'll have more to say about it. But hey, the thing I'll say, the very carefully navigated, to navigate that very narrowly. The thing I'll say is that playing Black Flag Resynced has been a really good reminder that I really, really enjoyed Black Flag when it came out. At some point, a lot of the Assassin's Creed stuff kind of, like it's not necessarily that it fell off. It's just that they made a whole lot of them, and it becomes very easy for them to all kind of blend together at a point. And I really didn't like 3. And Black Flag was a really good, like, hey, we can still make a good one of these, and all this boat stuff that you were worried about is actually really awesome. Like all the boat stuff was real cool in the original Black Flag. Is it cool in Resynced? Ask me again tomorrow. I don't know. Maybe I'll have an answer for you. But it's been a really good reminder about like, oh yeah, Black Flag is really good. Like I'm not sure how much, how many hours I want to put into a remake of Black Flag or what have you, but it is I guess I can't say the other half of that, but it's I really enjoyed Black Flag when it came out, it turns out, and I had kind of forgotten that. And so it's been nice to revisit this framework and see some of the things that they've changed and whatever. You know, they've got some new stuff in there. I haven't really seen much of that, but yeah, the original Black Flag was a hell of a game, and this is a fairly faithful remake of that. Connect those dots if you want to. I certainly will not. I can't. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about handhelds and their place in modern society. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. These days, all my passwords are glorious gibberish. Just a bunch of nonsense characters. Why? Because I know I'm never going to have to type those in because I've been using Keeper. Keeper is a password manager that creates strong, unique passwords for all of your accounts, stores them securely in one place, and logs you in automatically across all your devices, so you never have to remember or worry about your login credentials ever again. You know, you just you create super strong passwords for all this sort of stuff. You remember how to get into your Keeper, vault of passwords, and that's it. It's been great, especially, I've been setting up new devices and formatting them to different OSs and stuff. So, kind of starting from scratch. And every time you start from scratch, one of the first things you got to install, that's Keeper, baby. Because from there, you can log into everything else extremely easily. It's just been fantastic. And it keeps all your passwords in one place, securely, organized. You can get to it within seconds. And if you're running a business, Keeper takes the chaos out of managing access for teams. You can securely share logins, control permissions, and protect sensitive data without slowing down day-to-day work. That's really handy if you're working in a team and I have been in a situation where there was just a Google Doc full of passwords, and that's just bad. That's just bad. Migrating all of that to Keeper makes it easy for you to kind of, lock people out if the situation arises, and make sure that everyone has what they need to do their jobs. It's extremely handy. And right now, Keeper is offering a 60% off deal on personal and family plans at keepersecurity.com/Jeff. This offer is only for podcast listeners. That's keepersecurity.com/Jeff for 60% off personal and family plans. Make sure you use the link so that they know that we sent you. keepersecurity.com/Jeff. I'm never going to pronounce it AYN. I think that's how they want you to pronounce it because it stands for something. But the Ayn Thor is a dual screen Android based handheld. I ordered one if you remember, a handful of weeks ago. We had one Austin Walker on the program, and during a break he pulled his out, and I came back and sat down, and he was sitting there with it, and I could hear the Phantasy Star Online music coming from it. And that was the thing that finally pushed me over. I was like, okay, yep, yeah, I got it. Yeah, this is dumb. I got to get one of these, which is silly because I think I have no fewer than 20 devices already in the house that are capable of playing some version of Phantasy Star Online. But here we are. It's like a Nintendo DS, but a handheld Android device with dual analog sticks and enough buttons for menu screens and start and select and all the other stuff. Great as an emulation device, and I've been putting that through its paces. And I set up RetroArch because it has really good built-in save syncing across devices. And so now that I have, let's see, my phone, that thing, this PC, that PC, the laptop inside, I have no fewer than 5 RetroArch installs, and I want to sync saves between them because there are some games that I'm trying to play through, like I do need to get back to what Aria of Sorrow one of these days here. And so I've got that all set up, and that's been That's been neat. It's really weird, the dual screen, having two screens, because it's the Android launcher is on both screens, and you launch it on the screen you want to see it on, and they're both touch screens, and so you can start up a game on one and then do something on the other one really like weirdly easily, in terms of like, oh, you can have Plex running, and you can be watching videos on one screen. You can be watching hardcore pornography on one. To answer a question in the email, you can watch from Blue Sky. You can watch hardcore pornography on one screen while playing retro video games on another, which is it's the dream. I mean, let's face it, it's the dream. But yeah, because it's an Android device, there's a bunch of other stuff you can do. So if the garbage incremental / idle game you are playing happens to be inside of Roblox, you can run Roblox on it quite well, and watch hardcore pornography on the other screen. In the Google Play Store, there is if you go to the Google Play Store and you search for Mr. Do, Mr. Do is available in the Google Play Store for free. I'm sure I can't imagine it is an officially licensed thing. I'm sure it has to be like someone must have it must be a bootleg illegal, because when you launch it is Mr. Do, Mr. DU. They're not even running the official ROM set. They're running like one of the bootleg ROM sets, which is amazing and will not protect them if copyright cops were to ever come for them. But you can go get that. So I was able to easily have Mr. Do running on both screens, and it truly felt like freedom. There's so little of it to go around these days. Every day it feels like our freedoms are being restricted. But let me tell you, when you've got Mr. Do running on one screen and Do Run running on another screen, it almost feels like you've created your own makeshift version of like, what if Mr. Do had a DS sequel, sort of like Dig Dug Digging Strike. It's really the mind boggles, but yeah, there's a great DS emulator that takes advantage of both screens. It's a fork of Melon DS that runs the dual screen stuff super well, and so you can play DS games on a DS looking device. It does not come with a stylus. It needs a capacitive stylus in order to work, so you would need to acquire a very specific type of stylus for that to work. I have some of those around, but they're all big nubs. I want a little point. I need a little point because I'm trying to play Meteos, and I can't use a big nub to play Meteos. The Meteos are very small. And so I need to kind of investigate that and see if I can find a good stylus. They sell one, like when you order it from their weirdo website. They can they have a stylus that they will sell you for that, and like comes with a little pouch that sticks to the console. Which I was like, I'm not going to do that. But the Thor, it's quite good. They keep raising the price on it over and over again, so I don't know where prices are these days. And they sell them in waves. So I ordered mine, I think the day after Austin was on the show, and it just showed up, late last week. So it took a little time for it to finally show up. But yeah, it's an Android device running on Android 13, and I don't know. Some people get way into launchers and whatever else. In fact, we have a question in the email later about Emulation Station, which I don't really care for, and asking why I don't care for it. And it's because I have fucking 70,000 games. It's because I copy over full sets over to these things, and the scrapers always choke on it, and it's just kind of a pain in the ass. So it's that's really the big issue there, and the way it sometimes combines versions. A lot of these different scrapers kind of fall victim to some of the same issues, but yeah, that's kind of my main issue with a lot of the front ends. I was looking at Cocoon, and there's a couple of other ones that people seem to like on this, but I don't think I need it. because I'm trying to be a little bit more selective about what I copy over and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's a cool. It's a surprisingly cool device. The one thing I'll say is the other thing you can do. So for PC games, this is weird, man. Video game technology is crazy. I don't know if you noticed, but like while the video game industry was falling apart, a lot of interesting technology has been happening. You know, kind of on the back of Valve doing all of the work with Proton to get games running on Linux. There is a similar concept happening on Android devices. I'm running one called Game Native, and it will log in. You log into your Steam account, you log into your Epic Store account if you have one of those, and then you can install your PC games directly on this Android device and theoretically run them. I have had extremely mixed results with that. Download speeds from, like, I went to install Forza Horizon 6, which is a sizable game, as well as the first Descendant, which is less sizable, but and neither of those would run, despite saying, hey, you know, what it'll do is you know, since this runs on a wide variety of Android devices with different chipsets and whatever, like it'll say like, oh, we've got a we have a, yes, it's compatible based on your chipset. We think that it is indeed compatible. And then I launch it and it's just a black screen, and it sits at a black screen forever. So I don't really know if there's more work to be done on the configuration end, or what I actually need to do there. But I was playing TerraTech Legion, and that was running real nice. And that was a pretty awesome. It was cool to play that on there. Of course, you can also go the route of streaming games from a PC. I set up Moonlight and Sunshine. Sunshine is the server side application that you install on a PC, and then Moonlight connects to it. And that is probably, if I had to make a recommendation, or if I had to kind of put you off of this thing a little bit, if you're intending to play competitive shooters on it, don't. Because, you know, it has these offset analog sticks, which are generally fine. Generally totally fine for most games. But I have found in my experience that trying to play something like a Call of Duty on it and having to use this right stick with, like, precision, it was not a great time. So I don't know. Keep that in mind if that is a use case that you think you might be interested. What are they charging for these things now? I need to go look. But it's the low end model is $259. The high end model is $579. And I think that is just after a price increase. But that's so that's internal storage is why those prices have changed, because and RAM as well. The light version has 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. The highest end version is 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. You can also do a 512, and that's $479. And they have like a couple of other, you know, they have like a mid-range model that has 12 gigs of RAM as well. I ended up with a 16 gig model because that seemed like the thing to do. But yeah, that's a wide range of prices, $250 to just under $600, depending on, you know, what you're looking for there. But it's been pretty cool. Of course, this space is ultra cluttered, right? There are a zillion different handheld devices, some running Linux, some running Android, and you know, like there are a ton of different devices at different ranges of, you know, power and specs and what have you, depending on what you're looking to emulate and what you're looking to play on it. Your needs are going to vary. This thing is cool because it's shaped like a DS, and that's kind of awesome for doing DS stuff. I assume you can do 3DS stuff on it just fine as well, but I have not gone down that road. It's really neat. It's really neat. On the other kind of handheld news front, I spent some time. I dug out my my ROG Ally X, which I'm now looking at off screen, because I saw news of something called Winhanced, and I guess Winhanced is the to hear them tell it, and I haven't seen anything else on the market that does this, but it is a replacement for the Xbox full screen experience. So that's now a setting in Windows 11. You can go in and say, hey, what app do you want to launch when you launch into like Xbox mode, when you launch into whatever mode? And the only option you have is the Xbox app. But now Winhanced is available, and it is kind of the first thing that shows up in that drop down, and you can select that to boot on launch instead of the Xbox store. And it is faster, it is a little more responsive, and it is a little more friendly when it comes to launching things from Steam or the Epic Store or some of these other storefronts that exist. And that's kind of cool, because the experience, like the Xbox app has the ability to pull in your games from Steam, but in my experience, it's a very kind of sluggish app that takes forever to hand off to Steam and whatever. Winhanced is not like a snappy instant thing either, but it does seem faster, and it also, it will show your library. You can install games from it without going into Steam Big Picture mode or whatever. I think the end game here, and this would only make sense if you were a heavy Steam user, I suppose, which, you know, probably most people are. What the thing I actually want to see is I want to see Steam become an option in that drop-down menu of like Xbox replacement apps, of like things that can launch instead of the Xbox app. Because if it just launched into Steam Big Picture mode and you didn't have to jerk around with the Xbox app at all, I think that would also be a better experience. Winhanced is out there. They're doing a Patreon thing for like early access to features or whatever, but you can just go grab it and download it if you want to fuck around with it. It's pretty neat for what it is. And it'll hook your it'll hook some of the buttons that are, you know, that and prevent them from launching the Xbox app. It will kind of come back and launch the Winhanced stuff again. So that makes me think, like, you know, Matt, wow, if Valve actually spent some time doing that with their Windows client, then that would solve the problem of the Xbox app and the Steam Big Picture stuff fighting over the same kind of home button, which is one of the worst things about that handheld experience. So yeah, I don't know if you have one of these handheld devices, or if you're using the Xbox mode on a TV or something like that, give it a look. It's interesting, if nothing else, to kind of see that this stuff is starting to progress in some of the ways that I had hoped that there'd be some replacements for the Xbox app eventually, because that thing still pretty much sucks. Speaking of sucking, why don't we get into the news? I don't know what to start with. You know, there's kind of like there's been 2 long chains of fucked shit happening in video games. There's the PlayStation branch and the Xbox branch. I don't really know which one to start with. So I figured we would just flip a coin. I found I have 100 yen over here that I found, and so I figured, why we do heads will start with PlayStation, tails will do Xbox. I dropped where did it go? Oh god, the coin. It literally. Okay. It landed heads. We could flip it again, but honestly, I don't want to lose it again. So we'll start with PlayStation. July 1st, at the start of the new fiscal year, the PlayStation blog updated to let you know physical disc production ending in January 2028 for new games releasing on PlayStation consoles. This is a relatively short message from them, but this is them saying, as I said, well, as consumer preferences in the broader entertainment industry continue to shift away from physical discs to digital, Physical game disc production for all new games releasing on PlayStation consoles will be discontinued starting January 2028. Following this date, new games will be available on PlayStation Store and at retailers in digital formats only. This transition has no impact on games that already released or will be releasing prior to January 2028 in disc format. This is a natural direction for Sony Interactive Entertainment to adapt to consumer trends as the general preference for digital media significantly outpaces physical discs. This transition will enable us to align more closely with how most of our community prefers to access and play games today. And then a couple more throwaway sentences here just to finish it off. We'll continue to prioritize our resources to drive innovation in how players can access games and provide choices as to where players prefer to purchase new games, whether that's at retailers or PlayStation Store. People have not been thrilled about this news. There was a note. There was an update sent to developers to kind of fill them in on some of these changes as well. And the news there is if you ship a game prior to January 2028 on disc, and you need more discs after January 2028, you will be able to get them. I don't know how long that will stay the case, but if you ship a game prior to this cutoff, you will still be able to place new orders for retail discs and get them filled and what have you. Which is not comforting. And that doesn't, I mean, that's more of a procedural kind of interesting little side note than anything else. But it does mean that games that ship December 2027 are not going to be like, oh, we've got 1 month of discs on shelves and then that's that. They'll be able to do another run of discs if they so desire. But these days, I don't really get the impression that we're seeing like a ton of second or third runs for most games. Maybe the biggest of the big games are getting, some reprints and what have you. But it's not, it's not really a wide swath. This has set off a firestorm of sorts. The PlayStation, I mean, this was over the 4th of July weekend, so people were like, oh, Sony's been silent on social media. It's like, yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's bad news and, they're going to give it some space or whatever, but also it was the 4th of July, and so they probably weren't going to put a bunch of stuff out over the course of this anyway, but there you go. The kind of the traditional response has fired up petitions and whatnot. And this also kind of puts some kind of spotlight onto the year 2028 in terms of when we can expect to perhaps see a PlayStation 6 on store shelves. To me, this announcement, doing this right here in the middle of 2026, at the beginning of the fiscal year, whatever, to me, this is just them saying, hey, we know this is bad news, but like the new PlayStation's not going to have Drive. And so we're just going to say this now so that when the time comes to talk about PlayStation 6, we're kind of past that. That bad news is out there. Everyone knows about it. We don't have to attach it to the PS6 because you've already kind of processed that and moved forward or whatever. I wonder what they were expecting in terms of reaction. I'm going to say this is about the reaction I would have expected for this news. People are not happy about it, and I don't think it's good for video games. I don't think ultimately it's especially good for video games to get completely out of physical media, especially an industry that is struggling with price across the board right now. Especially an industry that is struggling to get new players in the door, whether that's because of price or because a lot of new players are not engaging with these sorts of ecosystems. They're not like going like, I need to get a PlayStation or I need to get this. They're like, I play games on my phone and it's fine. I just need more Robux or whatever, right? And so for an industry that is the average consumer in this industry is not getting any younger. I think that cutting off these sorts of avenues is not going to help that cause and is probably going to hurt that cause a little bit more. Obviously, the price in hardware is kind of the major problem here, and that is separate from the physical media thing. But the price of hardware being what it is, especially this late in the generation, there was a type of player that waited for these types of moments because they knew they could get a console for a lot less money and they could buy a significant chunk of used games. And so they could get into the modern PlayStation, the modern Xbox, the whatever Nintendo, they could get into that platform at a much lower price. And then theoretically, they would go on to buy new games. They would buy some used games up front and what have you, but they would be there. They would subscribe to your services, which is what everyone keeps saying they want to build and grow. And so doing away with used games completely as a part of this, I think ends up really destroying some of the, it's soft, it's fuzzy math, but this is destroying the connective tissue that gets a certain type of price sensitive consumer into this stuff in the first place. And so as it breaks that linkage further and further, you're just going to have people that can never afford this stuff. And like I said, part of this is the console prices, right? That's kind of the major issue here. But even if they get over the hump on that someday, then suddenly it's like, oh, and by the way, all these games are $80. Like, oh, okay. Well, great. I think that has worked for Valve. Obviously, the PC has been a digital-only platform, or for the most part, right? I mean, I think you can still walk into a Walmart and maybe find a copy of The Sims 4 or something for PC. But in a general sense, the PC has not been an industry that has been predicated on the sale of physical discs since the turn of the century. Did it happen that fast? I mean, maybe not quite that fast, but Steam has been around for a very long time. Half-Life 2 was really the big kind of push in that direction, and it's been on ever since, really. So yeah, 05, 2010, somewhere in the early to mid 2000s, I guess. Is when that change kind of finalized, and it went out with something of a whimper. You didn't really have a lot of players that were like bemoaning the end of discs on PC. I mean, most people buying a PC these days don't even get a drive with it, which I think is crazy. As someone who was always trying to rip discs, I still have use for drives. But the case for my current PC, actually, the front is all fans and fancy looking. It doesn't have room for a drive. I had to buy an external drive for that machine. And it really kind of the PC and the way discs kind of became on the PC there at the end is really sort of how console games have become as well. It was a lot of like, hey, this is a serial number, and that's the thing that actually matters because that's the thing we're going to check online. We've got this online DRM, and you're going to need this serial number. It got to a point where you would buy games, and sometimes you just enter the serial number into Steam just to see if it works, and it often did. Like, oh, weird, that's cool. And we talked about it on the bonus show last week, obviously, because that's when a lot of this stuff happened. But physical discs have not been an interesting way or a valid way to kind of preserve video games for a very long time. A lot of games released on disc are just like the idea of a game going gold and like, hey, we're done. The game went gold. We're done with it. That just doesn't happen anymore. They get to a point where hey, we got a build that passed cert. And so that's what we're burning to this disk. Everyone keep working because we've got our day 1 patch, then we've got our day 2 patch, we've got our day 7 patch, and we've got our 1.1 release, and we've got our point release that's going to add multiplayer maps. We got this, and so, you know, the main argument people have for this is like, oh, I like to own this. I like to have this in case, you know, because what's going to happen to these servers? What's going to be this and that? And it's like, yeah, you're not wrong. But like, you're still going to need to patch these games up. We also have an increasing percentage of games that connect to online servers as part of their functionality. But, you know, like, what the fuck is a disk when the Destiny 1 servers are shut down? What's that disk going to get you? Nothing, man. Nothing. And you could argue that that's bad too, but at the same time, that ship has largely sailed. And that ship has largely sailed because of the convenience of being able to just fucking push a button and download a game. Again, people on the PC have been doing it for a very long time, and it's been mostly great. And, you know, of course, people have kind of enveloped this in the kind of larger conversation, right? About digital rights and buying licenses instead of owning games, and people love to, and I'm sick. It's like I agree, but also I'm sick of seeing it. People are like, you'll own nothing and like it, and like, yeah, no, I get it, man. Yeah, like that's definitely where a lot of this stuff is headed. But I think a lot of that is also kind of divorced from the reality of consumer preferences, and you know, and a lot of this stuff kind of touched off a lot of people trying to dig into the numbers of PlayStation's physical versus digital sales and try to come up with some kind of smoking gun, like, they're lying about it. Like, you know, they are certainly stating their case in the best way possible when they try to make this sound like the direction everyone is going in. And I'm sure that includes like, oh, a bunch of discounted digital games are counting as sales the same way as full-priced physical games, and so the percentages are skewed, and so this is that, and you're like, yeah, I get it. But I think when you take the larger industry picture into consideration, when you look at the trends that other publishers have been seeing with their games when they talk about digital versus physical sales, the trend, at least, is pushing far enough in that direction that you can look at it and go like, yeah, I think that makes sense. At least from that kind of cold business angle. But again, I do think that, you know, especially on consoles, which were designed to be easy, which were designed to be simplified for people who need that. Like, it's not, you know, it's one thing to do this on the PC, right? It's one thing to do it on the PC because, you know, PCs are PCs, and it's kind of, you know, it's a little Wild West there, and you know, and the major storefront on PC is not owned by the company that makes the OS. You know, there is some competition there, which theoretically allows for some kind of price, you know, pressure in one way or another. But when you go to PlayStation, it's the PlayStation store, and that's it. There's no choice. There's no, oh, these guys are having a sale. There's, you know, like that stuff is just kind of gone. And so I think that's, you know, that's clearly something that is lost in the process. And I think gaming is worse off for it. Console gaming, particularly, is worse off for it, especially because there are still some parts of the world where the internet fucking sucks. And they have, whether it's data caps or extremely slow speeds, as the size of games increases, the idea of going like, well, I guess I've got to download 160 gigs of fucking files tonight in order to play this game tomorrow is gross if you live in those parts of the world. You know, the Midwest of the United States. In some cases, you know, Australia was always kind of classically noted as having dog shit internet, and that stuff hasn't gotten better. The thing I always figured is like, yeah, we'll eventually get to a point where discs go away, but it probably won't happen until we solve these problems with broadband. And so the thing that has instead happened is PlayStation has decided, whatever. And this is probably the clearest sign that you can look at that the numbers work out in their favor on the whole digital sales thing, is that PlayStation has done this now and have very clearly decided, yeah, that's okay. If we lose a bunch of consumers on this, we don't think it will be enough to matter. If like there's a certain class of digital citizen who does not have good enough internet to download games, and they don't have if their data cap is super garbage, and they can't really afford to download a number of video games, we're okay losing them. That is the message they're sending here, is that if you're in that particular bucket, you don't matter to them. And I think that's fucked. But it's also very on brand for an industry that is increasingly raising prices on everything, and for a hobby that is becoming so expensive that a lot of people are going to be priced out of it for a variety of reasons. So I don't think PlayStation is necessarily like wrong about their numbers, which I think some people are trying to float that and we're like, they're lying about the numbers. It's like, why would they do that? Why would they say, oh, we're going to lie about the numbers so that we can lose money now? Like, clearly they're doing this because at some point there's a cost savings to them to not have to run these plants that burn discs. There's a theoretical cost savings to them because used games will vanish. And they are probably looking at numbers and going, yeah, there are some people that will not be down with this, and those are acceptable losses. It never feels good to be lumped into, it never feels good to be labeled as an acceptable loss. And that's where I'm curious if this is exactly what they anticipated in terms of the kind of outrage, and what that manifests as going forward. Because obviously you'll have some people that just can't, right? They're like, okay, because of how expensive internet is and the data caps and what have you, I literally cannot participate in this ecosystem any longer. And that's that. And then there is some number of people for whom this is a preference that will cause them to fall off, that will cause them to go somewhere else or to give up on gaming entirely or whatever. And so that's the number that's actually in play, right? And that's the number that over the next year and a half, will those people stay mad? Right? Or will they just go, well, I don't know, I guess I want to play The Last of Us 3. I guess I want to see what old man Nathan Drake looks like on a PlayStation 6. So I guess I'm gonna do, like there will be a number of people that eventually kind of calm down on this stuff and just kind of get on board, and there will be some people who do not. And so I think that is probably the number they are most interested in, and right now you can't tell what that number is going to be because you've got a lot of outrage here, a lot of outrage, a fucking lot of fucking outrage. But what will that manifest as, in 36 months or whatever, or when they launch the PlayStation 6 or whatever you've got? Because that is when the rubber meets the road. That is when you're actually testing stuff out. They can look at stuff like GTA 6, but GTA 6 is not a good use, is not like a good case study for anything. Anything. GTA 6 being digital only, the only thing that will do is get people more used to the idea of buying games digitally if they're not already used to it. There will be a casual audience of people that might buy their first digital game that way. I don't know, if they're into that. Sebmal says, it's not just the disc thing, but it is a part of it. But I've had every PlayStation since the first one, and I cannot fathom a reason I would ever get a PlayStation 6. This is the larger conversation, right? And this is something that is plaguing Xbox as well. Everything Xbox is doing is in service of that exact fear also, I think. And it's what connects these two stories this week, is because why in the fuck would you continue to buy a closed system? Like the reasons become slimmer all the time. The reasons for buying into the PlayStation ecosystem, especially as these systems get more like a little bit more powerful, but not that much more powerful, and as they become more expensive, and still operate on this closed system, unless you really care about Sony's first party releases, which currently no longer come to any other platforms, but that may change again at some point in the future. Why would you buy a PlayStation? And on the Xbox side of things, why would you buy games from an Xbox storefront? I guess, like, actually, maybe the larger question is, okay, so services and subscriptions and whatever are all the rage now, except for the part where they're not. But let's just, as PlayStations and Xboxes continue to creep up in price, why would you go in and buy a console that forces you to pay an annual fee to play games online, when instead you could finally just get off your ass and figure out what it's going to take for a PC to work for you? PCs are, I get why they're scary. They're never going to be for everyone. But when you look at the value proposition at this point, as the price gap closes, as the performance gap is weird between those things, if you're already willing to go spend the $1,000+ on a PlayStation, doesn't it work out in the long run to get a PC, not pay for online access, not pay them $60 to however much a year for access to play your games on the internet, and kind of learn something in the process? I don't know. Like, I know that's a big ask. It is a bigger ask than a lot of people try to make it out to be. I don't necessarily want to trivialize PC ownership into saying it's super easy now, because it's not. It's come a long way. Huge leaps and bounds and major strides have been made to make that process a lot easier than it ever has been when it comes to playing games on a device, on a PC device. But it's simply not there yet. I mean, the ROG Ally X is a great example of that, man. It does not do it. It's a Windows device, and I was talking about Winhanced earlier, and you can install Winhanced, and that's like nice, but like, who's gonna know how to do that? You got to drop to desktop to do that. You got to fucking, you might got to plug in a fucking mouse to this handle. What do I have to fucking do to do this? I upgraded my Ally X to Windows 11 Pro so that I could remote into it, so that I could do all that shit. No one's gonna fucking do that. That's stupid. So, keep in mind that while the numbers often add up, and I can tell you that doing shit on a PC is not nearly as scary as it sometimes sounds, sometimes you're in over your head if you don't already know that stuff, And so the case for consoles does continue to exist in some form. But if you like playing games and want to play more games, sometimes, getting rid of the subscription service that is costing you that type of money every year, and instead spending that money on games, seems like an increasingly valid answer to that question. But I don't think anyone's going to fully crack that nut anytime soon, right? I mean, Steam machines are here, and the Steam machine theoretically would have been a great entry point for a lot of people to be their first, like, PC. But maybe not at these prices. So, But again, if everything is, quote, at these prices, then I guess, at some point it does become a valid discussion no matter what. Simultaneously, or in the wake of the PlayStation physical disc announcement, they also announced the plans to shut down the ability to purchase games on the PS3 and the PS Vita. The stores will stay up for re-downloading games, but by July 2027, those storefronts will be shut down around the world. If you're in Mexico, the Honduras, or Nicaragua, the PS3 store will be shutting down next month. So check your local listings. There's also been some reports going around about Microsoft's answer to this, or and maybe not answer to this, but like, hey, what's Microsoft doing on this front? What is Xbox doing on this front? And who knows if this is still running, because the number of people that just got laid off from Xbox is profound, right? And I saw a lot of engineers that were not necessarily attached to games and stuff, but like platform level engineers saying that they've been cut. And so, kind of who knows really. But The Verge originally reported on this, that there is something called disk to digital that is being tested internally over at Xbox. And this is the Xbox One, the original Xbox One plan, the original always online Xbox One plan. This is what they did back then, and now they're going to do it for real because enough time has passed that they can probably get away with it. So the idea here is that you can put a disc in your system, and it will grant you a license to play the game. And you can then download and play the game without leaving the disc in the drive. Remember, discs on modern consoles are just installers anyway. Nothing runs off a disc anyway. So they really are just, they really just are installing games to your hard drive. And so the idea here is that the digital, your license for that game, your entitlement for that game, is then tied to that disc. So if you were to give the disc to someone else, if they ever put it into their Xbox, they would take the license away from you. And so that is a way for them to prevent people from passing a disc around and all installing it or whatever. And they can do this because this is the plan that they had around the time of the original Xbox One. This is the exact plan that they had. This is why it works. So the testing seems to indicate that this will work with discs going back to the Xbox One, but not the Xbox 360. And the reason is because when they started to do Xbox One and they were walking down this road of this always online thing, they knew they needed to individually serialize each disc they sell. And so each disc has what is in effect a serial number on it that makes it unique. And so that's how they can tell, it's easy to think, and it usually is this way, that you burn a disc and it's a disc and they're all the same. That you do a run of physical media, every single disc is identical, and that's that. But that has not been the case. Well, for Xbox, it's not been the case since the start of the Xbox One, which at that point they started, individually serializing these discs. It is something that Sony did with PlayStation 2 games that had online support, if you're not familiar with that. So for games like SOCOM, to prevent people from copying, like running bootleg discs online, each one of those discs was serialized with, there was the system they called DNAS, I believe. And so that would prevent people from logging in at the same time with the same serial number or whatever. And stop that from working. And so this is not necessarily a new technology, but it is not something that has been used to great effect since the days of the PlayStation 2. And so we'll see. I mean, this is something, again, that this is what their plan was for the Xbox One. was the ability to like, okay, just put this disc in and then your license is on the thing. And so this enables you to still have, conceptually, a used copy of a game, because you could then sell the disc afterwards or whatever. In fact, there's like kind of a fun game you could play where you take your game, you install it onto your Xbox, and then you immediately go sell it back to, whatever store. And then you see how long it takes for them to put it in a drive. You go home, you play as much of it as you possibly can. And then one day they're going to put it in a drive, or someone else is, or something's going to happen, and then you're going to lose access to it. But in theory, there's going to be some kind of grace period there, right? Maybe they'll put it in a drive immediately just to make sure the disc isn't scratched up so much that it doesn't work, I guess. But that is, I don't know, something that you could maybe have fun doing when and if this ever rolls out. But to me, this seems like a stopgap. This is because they have a lot of discs in the marketplace. This seems like something they do as a way to provide some amount of backwards compatibility on whatever the next console ends up being from them. And it makes me wonder what they will do for Xbox 360 and original Xbox games. Because I would not be shocked if, in fact, I would be mildly surprised if the next Xbox, yeah, I don't know. Will that thing have a drive or not? Is the question. And I don't really know. But I do suspect that Xbox will head in this direction. They did some shit. They've been talking about, because they have the Halo thing coming out soon, the campaign remake, and so they've been talking about what that's going to happen and what what's it going to come with, and they're like, it's going to have a physical disc because we think you should have a cool artifact or whatever to put on your shelf or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's cool, man. Don't worry, this won't blow back on you when you eventually do the same thing in a handful of years here. Microsoft's not really in a position to respond to what Sony has done here. I think that's, it's social media and everyone just has the same 5 jokes over and over again. So there was a lot of people posting, oh, Microsoft has the chance to do the funniest thing. No, they don't. They don't have the people. They don't have the charisma. They're so fucked over there right now. They're not going to sit there and go like, for the gamers, we're going to do physical discs. Because that's not a direction that they necessarily want to head in as well. Of course, the leadership over there is swayed by the fucking breeze. So, who knows? Maybe they do get out there and try to say, we still care about physical discs, and maybe they fucking dramatically change course. But I doubt that would be. It is not the sort of thing. They're not in a position to make a funny video for social media of someone handing a disc to someone else. It would be bad for them long term, because I think that they will eventually do the exact same thing that PlayStation has done here. In fact, they're probably happy that PlayStation took the first bullet on this, because they don't. Because now they can just do it in 6 months, or in a year and a half, or whenever they start talking about the new console, and it will be a concept that people are at least familiar with. It doesn't mean they'll love it, but it's a concept they will at least be familiar with. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's been a brutal week for video games, and so this stuff certainly matters. And you almost wonder, is one of the reasons PlayStation got out here and said this stuff when they did, is because they knew that the Xbox, everyone, it's not a secret. Xbox had pretty much said it themselves that they had major layoffs coming. So do you think that they banked on the idea of like, well, the Xbox story is going to look way worse in the news cycle than this is, and so this will be bad, but it will blow over? Short term, it'll be replaced by the Xbox layoffs, and long term, the numbers are kind of on our side anyway, and we'll see how it goes. I don't really know. It does make sense for them to announce it because, again, it is a new fiscal year and whatever, and so and it does take the heat off of the PlayStation 6 announcement when that eventually happens, because they don't have to go, here's our exciting new console, by the way, fuck you if you like discs. Like, then they can say, hey, we already told those guys to fuck off earlier, so we can all just be excited about the PlayStation 6. Like, I mean, that's ugly. It's ugly, but doing business is ugly. You would think it wouldn't have to be, but that's the world we live in. Some other stuff here, just in terms of PlayStation news before we do kind of move on to Xbox. Like, if you thought that was it for PlayStation and questionable news, they did put Marvel Tokon on Steam because that game is coming to PC, because it is a multiplayer game, and because they were doing all that work before Sony kind of changed strategic direction and what have you. But according to IGN.com, who noticed it on SteamDB, 132 countries have been blocked from buying Marvel Tokon. This number is not identical to, but is extremely similar to the number of countries that was originally going to get banned from buying Helldivers 2. Back before they backed off of the kind of PSN requirement and reworked a lot of their strategy around the PSN requirement. And so the thinking here is that most of these territories are places, or I mean, potentially all of them, are places that do not have the ability to create a PSN account. Theoretically, because this is a cross-platform game, it seems likely that they would use the PlayStation Network for cross-play matchmaking, and so you would need to be able to log into a PSN account in order to do all of that matchmaking. And so it makes sense that they wouldn't sell it in countries where you cannot officially make a PlayStation Network account. But that does not mean that people are like, oh, well, I get it. It is a pretty unfortunate situation. Helldivers 2, according to IGN, was 177 countries. So that's a much larger number than the 132 for Marvel Tokon. So I'm not really sure why the disparity is there. We can only really guess that this is because of PSN requirements, because of a PSN account requirement, rather, because they haven't really gotten out there and said as much. With Sony seeming to really not give a fuck about bringing their games to Windows-based PCs anymore, and conceptually, like, seemingly pursuing a different track entirely on that matter, this is probably not something they give a fuck about. They gave a fuck about it when it was Helldivers, because they were in the middle of all of this stuff, and it was like, oh, geez, this is bad. We need to rework this stuff. Now, leadership change in place. They've walked away from the PC. This doesn't seem like something that they will go back on. This does not seem like a problem they will fix. If I had to guess, if I had to put money on this, I would say this is how it's going to be. It's a pretty long list of countries, according to SteamDB, that have restrictions on it. There are 6 countries where there's currently no price set. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the game can't be bought or played there. It just means for whatever reason, no pricing has been set in Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Philippines, Russian Federation, and Vietnam. And then there's a much longer list of countries. There's a much longer list of countries that simply will not be able to activate or purchase the game. The game is also blocked from cross-region trading or gifting, so you wouldn't be able to buy the game in a territory and then gift it to someone else in one of these other territories, which again if the thinking is like, well, these people won't be able to have a legal, real PlayStation Network account, and so thus we must block them from buying it. So if you are in Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, Angola, Antarctica, Antigua and Barbuda, Armenia, Azerbaijan, the Bahamas, Bangladesh, Barbados, Belarus, Belize, Benin, Bhutan, Bosnia Herzegovina, Botswana, Brunei Darussalam, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cabo Verde, Cambodia, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Chad, Comoros, Congo, Cuba, the Ivory Coast, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Djibouti, Dominica, Dominican Republic, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Estonia, Eswatini, Ethiopia, the Federated States of Micronesia, Fiji, Gabon, Gambia, Georgia, Ghana, Grenada, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Guyana, Haiti, Holy See, that's the Vatican City State. The Pope ain't going to be playing no Marvel Tokon. Iran, Iraq, Jamaica, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kenya, Kiribati, Kyrgyzstan, Laos, Latvia, Lesotho, Liberia, Libya, Lithuania, Madagascar, Malawi, the Maldives, Mali, the Marshall Islands, Mauritania, Mauritius, Moldova, Monaco, Mongolia, Montenegro, Morocco, Mozambique, Myanmar, Nambia, Nauru, Nepal, Nigeria, North Korea. Sorry, North Koreans. North Macedonia, Pakistan, Palau, Papua New Guinea. Hey, it's me, Papua New Guinea. Is that it? No? Philippines, Rwanda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Martin, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Samoa, San Marino, Sao Tome, Senegal, Serbia, the Seychelles. Solid Snake is fucked. Sierra Leone, the Solomon Islands, Somalia, South Sudan, Sri Lanka, Palestine, Sudan, Suriname, Syria, Tajikistan, Tanzania, Timor, Togo, Tonga, Trinidad and Tobago, Tunisia, Turkmenistan, Tuvalu, Uganda, the United States Minor Outlying Islands, Uzbekistan, Vanuatu, Venezuela, Vietnam, Western Sahara, Yemen, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. If you are in any of those following countries, according to SteamDB, you will not be able to purchase or activate a copy of Marvel Tokon. I'm not convinced that Marvel Tokon is a game worth purchasing or activating based on my time with the beta. But I guess we'll know next month how all of this plays out. And then there's Xbox. This all went down yesterday with a message posted to Xbox Wire that was also sent out to all employees globally. They titled the message, Resetting Xbox. Because it's fun, like a console. You got to reset it. You got to push the reset button on this. I'm not going to read this entire thing because it's got some length to it. But the short version is that they have announced the plans to lay off 3,200 people during this fiscal year. Half of that number was eliminated yesterday, meaning that there will still be 1,600 job cuts over the next 12 months. At a minimum. if they don't decide to lay off even more people. This kind of resolves some of the suspicions or speculation around the fate of a handful of studios as well. As they are saying here, 4 studios will leave Xbox to new management. I recognize that this is from Asha Sharma, who is the head of Xbox. I recognize that a year-long restructuring creates additional challenges. Unfortunately, it is not possible to make all the necessary changes in a single day, and I wanted to be direct about the scale. You know, a lot of the same kind of boilerplate stuff that you see in most layoff notices, particularly the ones from Xbox. Today's decisions do not reflect their talent or dedication. But she does say, our business today is not healthy. We are operating at margins that are 3 to 10 times lower than comparable platform and publishing businesses. We entered Gen 9 with a smaller install base and a higher cost structure. To grow, we bet on Game Pass, multi-platform, and a broader portfolio of content. While those businesses have created meaningful value, they did not grow at the pace we expected. As that happened, our core business weakened, and we added more teams, more investment, and more time, hoping for a better outcome. And now the industry is facing the most severe hardware crisis in its history. We must reset Xbox. To contextualize that a little bit, there's been some reporting about Game Pass specifically. Some of this, Cecilia D'Anastasio just had something go up on Bloomberg about this stuff, but this is kind of been swirling around in a lot of this. But it is kind of connecting the dots on some of their fiscal forecasting from years past compared to where they are today. And she says in her report here, when Xbox launched its Game Pass subscription service in 2017, executives set a goal of reaching 77 million subscribers by fiscal year 2026, which ended last month. This is according to a document that came out in the lawsuit around the purchase of Activision. There was a ton of documents filed in that became public, and so we know some of those numbers. And this is according to a person familiar with the matter, so a source report giving this number. Today, the platform has just 30 million subscribers. 4 million fewer than it did when the company last publicly shared data in 2024. And so that is not 77 million. In fact, there was a quote from Phil Spencer at some point, I believe, in that lawsuit, where if he said, you know, hey, if we don't grow and hit this number, like, we're out of the game business. Like, this isn't, you know, if we can't grow this thing, like, we're done. Whether that was something dramatic to say to help get the Activision deal over the line, or actually truth, hey, you know, that's up for debate. But if Game Pass only has 30 million subscribers and they have been expecting to have 77 million, which I imagine those forecasts had to have been revised since 2017. But obviously they have been spending a lot of money to bring studios in-house to put their games on Game Pass. But they have also been spending a lot of money on third-party deals, which we were talking about last week, saying that that it seemed like the third-party Game Pass deals had started to dry up. There have been a few people that have pushed back on that. Chris Kramer appeared on a podcast, and also I saw a post from him on LinkedIn. Chris Kramer is a legend in video games PR over the years. He's been everywhere. And he said that, you know, he kind of just said that's not true. That there is still some amount of deal flow happening on Game Pass, but I would not be shocked if it was at least reduced while they have to sit here and figure out what they're going to do next. Anyway, back to the message from Microsoft on this. you know, they kind of describe it as a 3-step process here. First, we will reset our content portfolio. Second, we will reset our platform. Third, we are resetting how we operate. As far as the content portfolio goes, this is where we get into some of the studio stuff. We now find ourselves competing not only with the largest publishers, but also with smaller independent studios. It is neither possible nor desirable to own every great independent studio. I don't think that was the strategy before, but okay. We have also learned that we are not the best home for every type of studio. In a typical year, we lost 64 cents for every dollar we invested. That is not where you want to be. When you spend $1, you want to make, I don't know, $3 to $5 back. Whenever they told me I couldn't hire somebody, whenever they told me that I could not grow the business, it was because they said, well, CBS, when they invest $1, they like to get 3 back. And so if you can hit those types of targets, then I'm sure that they would be much more receptive to what you're pitching here. Like, okay, so maybe next year is what I'm hearing. And also, that's fucking impossible. But okay, great. Anyway. As we reset Xbox, we will help independent creators succeed by providing open development tools and audiences to realize their vision. So what they're saying basically is we don't need to own all these studios, which is probably true. The thing I would say there is that their third-party relations have not always been awesome. It's really great with the smaller, like the ID at Xbox. Like, people seem to really like ID at Xbox. I mean, everybody loves Chris Charla. Everyone. So the ID stuff has been very well received as far as I can tell. But at large, you know, we've been talking for years now that there have been larger third parties that have just been like, I don't even know why we're putting our fucking games on Xbox, because they're just not making, you know, like they're not selling there. Like, people don't buy these games on Xbox. And so, you know, there's been signs that this stuff has been shitty for a bit here. And so when you stop owning those studios, you need to get in the business of making sure that they want to put their games on your platform, which is now, I'm not going to say an uphill battle, but, you know, they've got to win back some trust, I think, with some of the larger publishers who are ready to give that trust. I mean, to be honest, because all the larger publishers are desperate to sell more games. They need healthy boxes on fucking shelves in people's homes. They need healthy competitors at the hardware level so that they can continue to sell their games to as many people as possible. And so Xbox floundering helps fucking no one. It does not even help Sony in this case. Like, those days are over. It's a fucking bad scenario for everyone involved if Xbox is not a healthy competitor in this space. I honestly don't know if they can become one. I hope that they do. Anyway, they get into some of the specifics about the studios. Compulsion Games and Double Fine Productions will return to management and transition to independent studios with their IP, catalog, and runway for their next games. Ninja Theory and Undead Labs have entered terms to join new ownership with funding to complete and grow Senua and State of Decay 3. In France, Arcane's management is beginning required consultation with its Works Council to review potential strategic options. So that's, you know, like they have better worker protections outside of the US, and so there they have to review options and stuff before they can figure out what's next. When you look at the thing I heard over the weekend, I am impressed that any of these studios are getting sold, because it sounds like the time frame for some of these people to find buyers for their studios was like not even like 2 weeks. It was like an insanely short process. And when things happen that quickly, how do you even know what the fuck you're selling? Is IP coming with you? Are you just selling the people and the building, or is the tech coming, or is that staying centralized? Like, what actually are you fucking buying? And so they had to figure all of that out in the process. And so it sounds like, because Double Fine has put out a statement as well where they said, like, we have our games, which makes me think that they did indeed retain all of the games you think of as Double Fine productions. I would assume that's the case, but again, we don't know. Compulsion as well. That We Happy Few returns to them and all of that stuff, which I think makes sense because Microsoft, there's no value in that for Microsoft long term. In fact, the further damage to their the further damage to their credibility or their reputation or whatever that they would take by being like real sticklers about that stuff would probably be way more damaging than just giving these studios enough money and enough IP and enough stuff to just like go. If they were shutting these studios down, they would be giving severance to everyone, I would assume. And so at some point, I don't know if one amount of money is more than the other, but letting Double Fine go independent, letting Compulsion go independent is maybe not a zero-sum situation, but it's a lot of money that they're, it's a lot of stuff that they're not necessarily going to be monetizing to great effect going forward at Microsoft. If they were to keep stacking, if they were to keep, trenched, We Happy Few, Microsoft's not going to make a bunch of money on that, and it's going to make them look like dicks. And so at some point, it's probably better to say, okay, let's set aside some money for some runway here because we were going to spend a bunch of money on severance anyway if we shut them down. So let's give them, and hopefully this is a situation where they go like, oh, okay, they actually made us whole on the way out and we actually have a good shot. We don't know. She says runway in this, but we don't know how much money that is. Hopefully it's enough. We also don't know who is buying Ninja Theory or Undead Labs. They've entered terms, but those deals are not closed yet, and so it's maybe not Microsoft's place to make those announcements. But that is at least the that is at least the theory is that they will end up being owned by someone else. And so those are the 5 studios we know about right now. Like that's as far as we can tell. Anyone else is staying in-house. But there have been dramatic cuts across a lot of those remaining studios. To that end, she says, we are also making reductions across other units and in some cases shifting investment to focus on higher priority projects. These changes vary in size across Activision, Bethesda, ZeniMax, Blizzard, King, Mojang, and Xbox Game Studios. None of our first-party publicly announced games or projects are being canceled as part of these reductions. In addition, Mojang and King will now report directly to me. These 2 studios have increasingly become platforms and are our largest by monthly active players. They bring critical geographic, demographic, and differentiation to Xbox. So some reporting line changes I might actually say are long overdue. And King is they are the makers of Candy Crush. They came in as part of the Activision sale. It's why Activision is referred to as ABK, because it's Activision Blizzard King. If you're not familiar with King. The thing about Microsoft's acquisitions and the way that they handled them, and this is something that I think we saw flare up around the release and reception of Redfall, is it really seems like Microsoft thought they were going to be able to buy these teams, kind of leave them as is, and just kind of let them do their thing, which is like, on some level, that's like, oh, that's like a idealistic way to think about this sort of stuff. But then Redfall happened, and when you saw, I believe it was Matt Booty, it may have been Phil Spencer as well, But in the wake of Redfall's launch and some of the interviews, I think Greg Miller did one of those interviews, but it was this feeling of like, yeah, we were really hands off. And maybe we shouldn't have been. Maybe we should have been a little bit. We should be a little bit more we should have been a little bit more hands-on with some of those games or some of these games. And so, much like Sony had to learn a very tough lesson about who to trust internally, though maybe not as nefariously as Conquered was on the Sony side, Redfall is in some ways a similar lesson that Microsoft needed to learn. But they did not do the thing that companies typically do when they make acquisitions. They did not buy Activision and then immediately say, oh, all these central services you have for PR and marketing and all this other stuff, we're going to take 20% of those people, move them to Xbox kind of central, and then lay the rest of those people off. They didn't find a ton of redundancies, as they love to call them, in those organizations and immediately try to optimize and immediately try to bring them into Xbox. Like, they still kind of kept all of those games kind of running separately with all of the same people that were in place doing it. Sometimes external organizations doing PR, like a lot of those things stayed in place. You know, Pete Hines eventually retired and left Bethesda, you know, for reasons that he has been very vocal about in some places. But by and large, you know, a lot of the same people that were doing Bethesda stuff in a central capacity continued to do it. And I can't tell you if that's a mistake or not. You know, you're just like, I don't know, maybe if they had made those cuts early and centralized that sort of stuff, some things would have gone a little bit differently and they'd be saving more money earlier, or, you know, I don't, that probably doesn't matter. And it's a relatively brutal way to think about it. I don't know what cuts were made on those sorts of teams recently. Also, I don't know if that is a move that they did make. All we know is that there's been significant cuts. And when I load up LinkedIn, it's just a wave. It's every single post is someone saying, yeah, my time at Microsoft is over and this happened and this and you know, or hey, my entire team at ZeniMax Online Studios is gone. And I hope that the people who were left there, you know, like it's entire teams getting cut. It's fucking brutal. To that end, the makers of Elder Scrolls Online have kind of said, hey, we had a roadmap out there. We need to revise that because we're not going to be able to hit those targets anymore because of the cuts we just endured. A lot of these people are extremely seasoned. You have people that have been at Xbox for over a decade, but you also have people who have worked in video games for 20 years, 30 years in some cases. Which is not great for what your going forward plans seem to be. It sounds like the cuts at id have been especially harsh in terms of like a lot of coders. I don't know how you do a QuakeCon this year with what just happened. The Doom DLC just shipped this morning. The Doom DLC just hit, like, as this podcast was starting, like an hour before. It's let's get through this and we can talk about how irresponsible a lot of this seems. The second point, resetting the platform. This is really about flattening the org. They say, we know that great technology gets better when it gets simpler, not bigger. Today, in some parts of the company, work passes through as many as 14 layers of management. Our platform teams are 40% larger than they were at the start of this generation, even as our player base and playtime have declined. That complexity has slowed decisions, blurred accountability, and made it harder to deliver for players. As we reset Xbox, we will simplify. We will reduce management layers to no more than 5, and where possible, 3. We will deliver success through a flatter organization that is built around makers. And in parentheses, individual contributors focused on building, player coaches, leaders who remain deeply involved in the work while developing their teams, and directly responsible individuals, DRIs, who own key decisions and outcomes. We'll streamline how we work across our tools with a cleaner code base, shared services, and 50% reduced vendor spend. So external vendors, if you were working for Xbox, good luck with that. These DRIs, which DRI, as far as I'm concerned, stands for Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, which is a thrash band, which I think is probably appropriate here. The thing I'll say about this whole 14 layers of management thing here is a lot of the people I've seen get cut are people that are very hands-on with fucking games, man. It's not a bunch of middle management getting wiped out here. It's not like they just went in and wiped out middle management and said, okay, if you're at the top of this org chart now, you are expected to lead this organization while still working on games. We're not just going to have a bunch of people sitting around being decision makers. Unless you're lucky enough to be a DRI. I will say there's something I like about the, and I think the player coach metaphor is a little fucking strained, but sports metaphors in business are always fucking embarrassing. I like it when you have people leading organizations that are still very much involved in the game that they are making. I like it when you have people at the top of an organization that can answer a whole lot of questions about where that game is at any given time, while also doing a bunch of the work themselves. That's a strain, of course, and sometimes the reason middle management exists is because you need people to manage people, because the people that are doing the work on the game are not always great at managing people. I can say that with some experience. As someone who is maybe not always amazing at managing people. And so I think that makes some sense. And you have more people in more positions that have a fuller understanding of what they're asking people to do. Hey, can you work this weekend? Hey, can we fit this thing into the game? Can we, is this something we can, is this out of scope for what we're building? Are we creeping too many bad features into the game? If you're there and you're doing all the stuff and you're involved in that part of the process, then that's going to matter to you a lot more than if you're just some guy cruising in Don Matrix style and being, can we put a real money auction house in this game so people can buy tank skins? Is that something we can do? Oh, we're on top of that, Don. Slipped off my shoes. So, I don't necessarily think that that's like a bad way to build your organization. But that said, I think Microsoft has been such a fucking strange place to work for so many fucking years, for so many different people. Everything about the politics to just the way things are structured, to stack ranking, to everything they've done over the years and walked away from or come back to, being a part of the tribe, a lot of times sounds like it kind of sucks. And so I think there's something valid about them unfucking some of that, and some of this sounds a little bit like that. I just don't know if I believe it. I don't know if I believe that they can actually unfuck it, because Microsoft is still a very large company. And a lot of that rot starts at the very tippy top. So, hey. Good luck on that one. And then the third point here is resetting how they operate. They are appointing a chief operating officer that has end-to-end P&L responsibility across content, hardware, platform, and services. Helen Chang has been promoted into this role. I believe she was running Mojang. Yeah, she's been leading Mojang for some chunk of time here. She will bring our businesses together under one operating model, making sure we make clear investment decisions, learn from our successes and failures, and hold ourselves accountable for results. So fewer decision makers at the top, and kind of unifying that sort of stuff to give people more direct responsibility across the entire business. probably not the worst idea in the world either. I just, I think a lot of this ultimately comes down to, do you believe that the people at the top of Xbox can actually execute on this, and that they have, I think they have the stomach for it. I mean, they're out here doing this, so they're obviously some cold-blooded individuals, but are they also the right people to be in the seat to unfuck this? I don't know that I don't know that I think that they are. We'll see. Helen, has been around for a long time, and is probably a solid person to put in that sort of role. And so that's basically what their message has been. The rest of it has been the fallout from seeing, like, okay, there's been, a lot of writers at Obsidian are now gone, and a lot of the tech team at id is now completely gone, and how these massive cuts have been. It sounds like Blizzard has not seen any cuts yet, but remember, there are still 1,600 jobs to be cut over the course of this fiscal year. And so that is something that they, may have to contend with at some point in the future. The head of Bethesda sent out an email to Bethesda staff in the wake of this. This is Jill Braff. That IGN got a hold of this letter and reported on it, and said that the layoffs and change in strategy, quote, reflect the realities of our industry and business and our responsibility to ensure Bethesda is operating from a more stable foundation. To be successful in the future, we need to change course. We must strengthen our business, return to sustainable growth, and ensure we can continue investing in our franchises and our players. I know that doesn't make a day like today any easier. And so this sounds more like a return to focus, and some of the other stuff that when they talk about what they do from here, they posted her letter in full here. Sorry, I'm kind of looking for a specific passage. To best position Bethesda for future growth, we are shifting from a planning model primarily centered on what's next for each independent studio to one that focuses on our strongest franchises and determining the content roadmap that best serves our players and Bethesda as a whole. I think when they say something like focuses on our strongest franchises, I think if you were expecting more from Starfield, I think it was already a safe bet, but I think that this is a kind of an acknowledgement here that they are going to quadruple down on the next Elder Scrolls, and they're probably going to get a goddamn Fallout into production as fast as they can, on the heels of Elder Scrolls, I suppose. Meatlove69 in the chat says Fallout remake, maybe? Bethesda would not do a Fallout remake themselves. In fact, someone else has put in quite a lot of work into a Fallout 3 remake that has yet to officially materialize, and I don't even know if that game is... I assume that is still happening, but maybe it is dead. Who can say? But I have seen footage of a Fallout 3 remake, so I don't. Someone somewhere made something. Hey, we'll see. But that's a huge missed opportunity, right? And it's the timing, right? It's no one's fault per se, right? They wanted to make Starfield, and if you're a betting man or woman or person, and Todd Howard comes to you and says, we want to do a sci-fi thing, with the landscape being what it was for sci-fi games at that time, there were not as many of them and all this other stuff, and like, hey, we want to take this concept and apply it to space. Like, the answer is yes, dude. You go, yeah, make that game. Make that fucking game. I don't think Starfield accomplished what they set out to do. I don't think Starfield qualitatively was a good enough game to meet to meet what they need, to meet players' needs or what have you. It's got a really great art style. It's got a really neat look to it. The game was empty. The story was bad. The way the story resolved and folded upon itself for New Game Plus purposes was fucking terrible. And some of that was maybe a troubled development or trying to get stuff to work or trying to apply what they had worked on for games based on land and trying to make it happen in space. Like shit happens. I think that game was supposed to come to Switch at one point. And I wonder, I can't imagine it's still going to, but who knows? And so you would not have known that Starfield was going to turn out like this. Again, I don't think it's anyone's fault that we don't have a Fallout game to go with the popularity of the Fallout TV show. It's just the way a lot of this stuff ended up working out. They're knee deep in Starfield. All this other stuff is progressing. Like, hey, yeah, we're going to just do a Fallout TV show. That hits harder than probably anyone would have anticipated. I think they're filming the new season right now. And so that has proven to have legs that maybe you might not have expected. And so at some point you're like, okay, what can we do about Fallout? What's the answer here? Nothing. No, we can't do anything about Fallout because the BGS team is finishing up Starfield, and then we already know we need to roll right into Elder Scrolls because that's already kind of happening. And so it would be, it's not like they can drop that and do Fallout instead. I mean, that's a years long. That would be the end of the world. And so to me, it is surprising that we have not seen remakes yet. Again, because there was, and I maybe still is. I don't know the current status of any kind of Fallout remake project. I just know at some point someone was doing one. And that became a pretty open secret, I think. But it we've had all these shows come and go. We've been through June of this year. I might have thought that this would have been the year that they finally pulled it and said, like, yeah, okay, here you go. Fallout 3 is back. And that hasn't happened. So maybe there's still, I don't know, maybe that project went sideways and didn't come together. I mean, who knows? Maybe it was fucked and they canned it. Anything can happen, right? Video games are truly a land of plenty. Anything can happen at any given time. And you also had Obsidian working on a couple of projects as well. I mean, you could have said, oh, hey, like as soon as this stuff is done, you need to work on, you need to do some Fallout stuff. But then you get the egos of creators involved and who gets to be the next person to put their stamp on Fallout. And I think that BGS probably wanted it to be them. And that ends that conversation. Maybe it shouldn't, but it seemingly did. So yeah, I think like Fallout just ended up being a victim of really bad timing across the board. And I do think that you are left in this situation now where Starfield has kind of, let's say, come and gone. Not an abject failure, but probably, by the metrics of, man, we think that this could be the next Skyrim in terms of assuming that they at least thought, hey, this game could have the same type of legs that Skyrim has, and we could port it for years. We could do this and that. And, there's a lot of you would assume what would happen with that. It does not hold the place in people's hearts and minds that Skyrim did, that Elder Scrolls does, all of that sort of stuff. It kind of came and went. Not to say it did bad, it did fine. It probably did okay by some metrics. But it just doesn't seem like it ever had the legs that you would want out of a game like that. So I have to imagine, in light of everything that's happening, the pressure for the next Elder Scrolls game to deliver has to be fucking massive. Right? I to me, that now, I mean, it always kind of felt that way, but holy shit. What a terrifying project to work on. I bet it's also a really exciting one because you're redefining the franchise and pushing it forward. Hopefully, you better be. Oh, God. Woo! That's a really scary prospect, right? Because again, you know, like if Starfield didn't really do what it was supposed to do, and the entire Xbox business is struggling, like, dude, like your games, you know, you put aside some of the kind of perennials, some of the constants, you know, whether that's Minecraft or you know, Call of Duty to a certain extent. Like Elder Scrolls is like about as big as it gets. And also, you know, about as big as it gets when we talk about single player video games, you know? Like a lot of the other stuff we're talking about is, you know, multiplayer games, games with constant updates, live service this, Minecraft as a platform, like all of that. Like in a lot of ways, Elder Scrolls could end up being the last bastion of that. You know, I guess the question becomes like, if, let's assume Fallout's up next, because why wouldn't it be? If Elder Scrolls doesn't hit as hard as it needs to, do you just go right back in and say, all right, go make Fallout? Or do you start to tinker with that team? Do you start to make changes? Do you start to go like, okay, we need to reassess what we're doing here, because if this team is not getting it done the way, and I think that's an unfair thing. You can't, Skyrim happened for a lot of weird reasons, right? The way Skyrim became as big as it did, its place in gaming as far as this ultra moddable platform, and other games are that, but like Skyrim caught on in a way with a lot of great and exciting and weird mods and everything, that it took on a life of its own in a way that all those other games kind of didn't. It's sort of a fucking strange thing. So I don't really know. I don't really know how that goes over the next 5 years or what have you. And you know, especially on the other side of deep layoffs, right? I mean, at some point that's like, you know, everyone's job who is left, it just got harder on top of all of that because they have fewer people to make the work happen. And at the end of the day, they're all trying to sell games on consoles that are too expensive. Like there's really a lot of fucking bad shit stacked up, and it's, you know, the Microsoft currently with all of the layoffs and everything else, but like most of the things impacting this business are impacting everyone in some way, shape, or form. So that's kind of where we're at with Xbox. I don't really know what they do out of this, right? I mean, they're trying to sell a console that's never been more expensive. They're trying to make games with teams that have been larger before. Like, there's something to be said for the idea of optimization and, hey, we're going to have fewer decision makers so we can move faster, so we can do this. And like, some of that stuff makes some amount of sense. But you just laid off 10% of your staff, and another 10% is to come over the next year. And so what do you do? And also, like, the kind of the larger thing here is you are laying off a lot of people with extreme amounts of experience at making and shipping fucking high-end video games. That's not to say that every one of those projects has been a sales success. because that's kind of two separate things. But so many people who have shipped so many games, talented individuals who know a lot about how to get this shit done, are being shown the door. What do you do on the other side of this? You know? Like, okay, you've like wiped out so much knowledge. It's going to be a great time to be a fucking consultant, right? Because all the people who know how to get this done just got laid off. And so now you're going to have to pay a bunch of expensive consultants to come in and tell you how to make games. Which is fucking crazy. So I don't think that you reset Xbox without games. And I think that the cuts that they're making, and they'll say like, oh, you know, we're not canceling any of our publicly announced games. We're not doing this and that. And it seems like they want to focus on hits or whatever. And you know, you could, they're trying to make the case like, oh, not every studio belongs, you know, like not every studio is a great fit for what we're doing. And so, yeah, Double Fine, some of these other people maybe need to not be here in order to thrive. It makes sense. I have been a small thing inside of a large company before. Sometimes it really fucking sucks because everything slows down. All the things that you used to be able to just fucking do, you can't, because you're sitting there waiting for someone to approve it. You're sitting here I got to make my fucking case. I got to build a pitch deck for this fucking thing that I know we fucking need to do. And I used to be able to fucking do this, but now I can't fucking do this anymore. Like, there's a case to be made for that. But at the end of the day, I don't think Xbox is better off than they were before. Obviously, right? I mean, they can talk about optimization and how they want to get where they want to get to, and you know, but like they talk about this resetting as if there's going to go through this and they're going to get to the other side of it, and then what? Who's going to do this? You still employ a lot of game developers, but like looking at the cuts you've made, so I can't help but think like, and this would be a much slower and harder reorganization to fucking do. But wouldn't you almost be better off going like, okay, we're going to start to combine some of these teams, and yes, there will be redundancies, and there'll be like the layoffs would still be just as brutal, but you really get the impression that they're taking some incredibly talented individuals that like that you would want to have on your side when the chips are down, when you are trying to fucking make a game without as many resources. You want the people who were there last time this happened. You want the people that have like decades of experience. They're like, oh yeah, we used to do this with 40 people. I don't know. You want the people like that to be able to say, okay, here's how we can get this done. Here's the cuts we can make. Here's the changes we can make. Here's, you know, the scope we can change for this game to try to fucking get this shit done. And I'm sure that there are still people like that left, some in various pockets of this organization. But dude, yeah, I don't see how you come out ahead. One more thing, one more little anecdote that I will share is I was talking, you know, I talked to a couple of people over the weekend about this stuff, just like, hey, you know, like it's fucking brutal out here, you know, like people in various adjacent places. And one person said to me, I don't know how Matt Booty ever looks anyone in the face ever again. Because he's the game guy, right? He is the highest ranking. Well, Helen is now going to be COO or whatever, but I don't know which is technically which, but like, you know, he is in a lot of ways one of the last executives standing. Phil Spencer is gone. Sarah Bond is gone. A lot of the other kind of Xbox leadership has been kind of swept out. And so, you know, he is someone who has a lot of experience in making video games, especially making them with smaller teams and all of that sort of stuff. But anyway, it's a tragedy It is an absolute tragedy. You know, forget about the future of Xbox and like, oh, what's going to happen here with with the next Xbox or whatever. Like, yeah, sure, dude. The idea that this many people got swallowed up by this company and then kind of immediately spit out after these acquisitions, I think is embarrassing. And I think some of the ways that they are framing this, like, it seems like to be something of an acknowledgement of like, hey, yeah, when things were going bad, we spent more money and acquired more studios and it didn't get better. And so part of the letter that Sharma put out is pretty expressly a condemnation of the way the business had been going for the last handful of years under Phil Spencer. Now that's old hat, right? What do you do when you're trying to reset things and when things have been going bad? You blame the outgoing regime. You completely blame them. You lay as much of that on them as you can, and you try to. Some people in those positions are actually completely okay with that. They're like, yeah, no, this is how it works. Like, you gotta put a scapegoat on this. Like, yeah, it's me. Yeah, put it on me. I'm not here anymore. It's fine. You know, like that's how that's how executive shit be executiving. You know, but I don't think the little bits and pieces of strategy that they have gotten out there and said, hey, here's where we want to be. You know, because in light of all this stuff, she also said. And this is from the Bloomberg article, but I think maybe this was in her letter as well, that Asha Sharma's new goal is to reach more than 1 billion gamers every day across platforms. Which that's not 1 billion people owning an Xbox and turning it on and whatever. Remember, this is people playing Candy Crush. This is the however many hundreds of millions of people play Minecraft. This is people interacting with Microsoft services in some way, shape, or form. That's still an intensely large number, and not something that I think you really need to say in the middle of laying off as many people as you're laying off. So I think some of that is a little tactless, perhaps even tasteless. But these are extremely crass times that we live in. So things have coarsened so much over the last handful of years here. And so I think it's disgusting. And also I think that's where this industry is at. You know, it's not in a good place. Like, I don't think that they're lying when they say, hey, the business is bad and we need to fucking fix it. Like, yeah. No one is surprised to hear someone at Xbox say, yeah, things aren't really going great. They haven't been. And so we got to make some changes. And you start to wonder what's next. You know, obviously, if Game Pass is at, less than half of what their original goal was for subscribers, it becomes very easy to see a scenario where they start to unwind Game Pass a little bit. And they did say, oh, we were looking at more options for pricing and more packages or whatever. You know, maybe they start slowly creeping away from that. By offering more choice, but offering choices that are not nearly as good as what Game Pass was when it had everything in it. They've already done some of that, by removing Call of Duty. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe the future of Game Pass, as I've said before, maybe it does end up looking a lot like PlayStation's subscription service, and they don't offer mainstream plans that offer day one access to all of their best games. And maybe they keep that around spiritually because, that's what they launched, but the price of that particular tier that goes, that includes day one first party games, maybe that one becomes uncomfortably expensive. And you use that as a way to kind of wind down some of this stuff a little bit. I don't know. I don't really know. But it's a huge tragedy, and again, like it's the internet is awash with people saying, hey, I just, like I was at Xbox until yesterday. Yesterday was my last day at Xbox. This, like again, it's it's a lot of talented people, and I don't know that the industry is in a place right now to absorb all of those people, because there are already so many people who have been out there looking for work for years. And having a hard time finding anything. So it's really rough out there right now. It's not like you can just immediately go start up a new studio and be like, okay, let's get going, without funding, and who's going to fund it, right? Zorga asks, do you think that BGS unionizing helps anything? I maybe they get better severance on their way out or whatever, but I don't know that this is a case where the union is really, the union is not going to prevent these people from losing their jobs. The union will obviously be able to make statements and say like, hey, this company that actually, if you look at the company-wide financials, is doing just fine, is laying off a huge percentage of people because they're scumbags. And I think that's a message everyone can get behind. It's not going to stop that from happening, at least here in the U.S. They still have a year to do more, right? They still have, so, Pat says, sounds like Blizzard didn't get hit simply because they have a lot of unions. Maybe, yeah. Like that stuff is not impossible to navigate if you're looking at laying people off. Like there is a process for it. But yeah, maybe that will take a little longer. But I don't think that necessarily will save people in the long run. But yeah, there's a hardship fund that started up. Yeah, a lot of people looking for work. There are, you do see a lot of openings out there. That's the kind of frustrating thing, is like you see a ton of job openings across weird pockets of video games and whatever, but like, the competition for each one of those spots is just getting harder and harder all the time. And there's sort of a, I don't know. It's been a very unfriendly job market for a long time now. And I wish everybody the best of luck out there. Also the thing that's going to happen here is you will have a lot of people that just leave video games and never come back. People with extensive institutional knowledge about this, that are like, okay, yeah, I spent this amount of time looking for a job in this sector, and those jobs just aren't there, so I'm gonna go do something else, and then they go do something else. And so the brain drain on this front, the brain drain is something we saw happen on the publishing and journalism side of things, and that is something that I think is still ongoing to a certain extent. I think it's happening in video games proper now to a huge degree, and so you start to wonder, like, what are video games going to look like on the other side of this, and like what does it look like when people are done, when the industry has right-sized itself? How do you move forward from there once we're kind of out of this panic mode? And when is that going to happen? And can we bump it up somehow? And I guess the answer there is like, not really, because I think a lot of this is going to be further dictated by console pricing. And those aren't going to go down anytime soon. And so these aren't job losses that are happening as a direct result. AI is not taking these people's jobs per se, but the AI industry and the way it is gobbling up resources left and right is destroying a lot of industries, not just video games. Gus asks, do you think the industry overgrew from the COVID bump? Yes, I do. It's easy to say that now, it's easy to say that now. It was easy in some ways to say that then, but the thing I was told, and this goes back to the shitty way that business works, the shitty way that business is. But because of interest rates being as low as they are, it was so easy to borrow money back then. And so there was a bigger demand for gaming, and it was easy to borrow money. And so at some point, if you're the head of a company and you're not taking advantage of this to grow your company for shareholders, you're not doing your, and I mispronounce it every time, your fiduciary duties to the shareholders to grow the company as big as possible. And so if you weren't taking advantage of that situation to grow, the shareholders probably would have come and demanded that you get fucking canned. And it's just the shit ass fucking nature of fucking capital. It's fucking disgusting. But and again, anyone with half a brain looked at that and said, hey, at some point everyone's gonna fucking go back to work and they're not gonna sit around playing Animal Crossing all day. So what do we do when engagement numbers fall off a fucking cliff? Because they're damn good now, but it surely can't last forever. It was very easy to see that stuff. But again, everyone was on this fucking death march because that's the way capitalism works. It's fucking terrible. I don't know what else to say, man. Yeah. It's rough stuff. In other news, Nintendo is going to issue a revision of the Switch 2, but only in Europe because of new laws over there about batteries that need to be user replaceable. So they're going to redesign the Switch 2 as well as Joy-Cons, and I think even like the N64 controller and weird shit like that. These are only going to be sold in Europe. And they will be heavier, I guess, here. So this is videogameschronicle.com, your home for the news, is reporting that the new Switch 2 will be 14 grams heavier with the controllers attached, and the battery will have a 1% smaller capacity. And so basically they're revising the console that is going to be sold in Europe. It's not like they're going to issue a new SKU, like the new Switch 2 or anything, but it's just like as the old model goes out of stock, the new models will enter stock in Europe. Okay, VGC actually has a list of products here. So the Switch 2 will be available in the fall, I guess. It'll be the Switch 2 console, Joy-Cons, Joy-Con 1 and 2 controllers, the Switch 2 Pro controller, the N64 controller for Nintendo Switch, and the GameCube controller. Will all be seeing revisions that allow for user replaceable batteries. And these are not going to be sold anywhere else for now, until other countries pass similar legislation, I guess, which is unlikely. It will not be a case where you can choose to buy the new version. It is just going to be when the old version goes out of stock, they will be replaced with the new version. I don't know how I feel. I mean, I guess as a trade-off, like, a user replaceable battery is a big deal. 14 grams is not that much heavier. 1% off the battery life, not that big of a deal. That seems like a decent way to go. Similarly, and presumably for the same reason, in early 2027, Nintendo of Europe will stop selling the original Switch. You will not be able to buy the Switch 1. Retailers will not be able to order new stock of the Switch 1 starting in early 2027, which is, again, probably because of probably because they're not going to do the work to update that in the EU to do the battery stuff. So rest of the world, you want a Switch 1? No problem. But if you want one with a replaceable battery, we're just going to discontinue the Switch completely. So that kind of, I don't know, that kind of makes sense. There will be a lot of used ones out there, I suppose, if you want that sort of thing. And lastly, in the news, IO Interactive has confirmed, again, according to your friends at videogameschronicle.com, that it will continue working on the project known as Project Fantasy, which was a game that Microsoft was originally scheduled to publish. It was a deal that they had signed. But IO Interactive has issued a statement here. Following the end of our external finance partnership on Project Fantasy, IO Interactive has regained full ownership of the project and our IP. We will continue to develop and fund it independently amongst our other projects. They did end up laying some folks off, and I guess they closed their Istanbul studio. With this context, we had to find a new balance for the long-term future of the studio, focused on the success of our main internal core titles instead of external projects and potential mobile game derivatives. This has meant making changes as well as proposing changes across our studios, the closure of our Istanbul studio, and starting a process to part ways with colleagues who have been a meaningful part of what makes IO Interactive what it is. So Project Fantasy, as I understand it, we talked about this a little bit. But assuming this is the game that Microsoft was publishing and all of that stuff, because IO Interactive didn't just come out and say, oh yeah, IO Interactive or Microsoft fucked us over. They just said, an external partner is whatever. But my understanding is that the game's called Legends of Evermore. And it is like a 3-player co-op game, fantasy themed, and it is co-op. There's boss fights. There's I talking to someone with knowledge of the situation said the game is sick. So take that as you will. But the person I talked to about it seemed to really like it, and that it has seemingly some kind of procedurally generated individual rooms, as well as boss fights and that sort of stuff. So yeah, not a ton of details there. And maybe that's not even the final title and all this other sort of stuff. So some caveats on that, but that is my understanding of what Project Fantasy is, and it sounds kind of neat. So it's good to hear that they are still continuing to work on it. And that's it for the news. Whew. That's it for the news. What fresh hell will we be talking about next week at this time? No one knows. But there you go. Let's check out some emails. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. If you want to send in some emails, you absolutely can. X4N wrote in to say, in light of Sony, we kind of talked about this, in light of Sony stopping with physical games, could this be the break Microsoft needed to get a lot more people to go with them next generation? If so, will Microsoft take advantage and keep physical media for Helix or squander it? Again, I don't think that they're in a position to do this. No, I don't I don't think it's something that they would take advantage of. I think it's likely that they'll do the same thing. Also, I think that there is so much stink on what they've got going right now that if they were to get out there and say, we're just keeping physical games, I think the response would still be like, no one cares. I don't think it would work for them. I don't think that they have the goodwill in the market right now to pull that off. And again, with the majority of players buying games digitally, I mean, like they're the Game Pass people. You subscribe to their service and download their games. It's not about discs for them. It hasn't been for a long time. So no, I don't think that that's something that they would be in a position to take advantage of. And I don't think it makes a ton of sense. And I don't think it would go well for them, especially on the heels of laying off all of these people to try to be like, we care about the gamers. I don't think that would fly right now. Let's see here. Carl wrote in from Leeds with a question about the gaming media and paid reviewers, but not paid reviewers in the way that sounds. And the difference between paying for your own games and getting them for free. My friend and I often discuss the upcoming games and the reviews for them. Sometimes we point out that a game will be scored by a person, quote, that's paid to play it and got given it for free. Henceforth, their review can either be seen to be dismissive, perhaps because the game is like so many others they have played, or overly generous in score because it is quirky and different. As someone who's been on both sides, what's your take? I appreciate a number of points brought up in reviews are objective. They're really not. They're kind of not. I mean, it has graphics, I suppose, is objective or whatever. But surely one is more likely to give a game a chance if they spent money on it, as opposed to it being another first-person shooter or open-world epic that they got given for free, with loads of other games waiting to be checked out on their backlog. Surely there's a bias towards a short, quirky niche title that they got for free. No. Because who cares? Like, if I buy a game where it's for free, like, I don't even notice, dude. It's not, it's the other thing is, you say, surely one is more likely to give a game a chance if they spent money on it. That is a bias. Wouldn't you rather hear from someone who, like, I could walk away from this game at a fucking moment's notice because I don't have that investment in it? The idea that someone, and I've been in that position, where I've bought a bad game and fucking stuck with it because, god damn it, I paid money for this stupid thing. I'm going to fucking play it. That doesn't make the game good. It makes me dumb. So no. If you're asking, like, do games that are derivative of popular genres maybe not get the attention that they would get otherwise because there are a billion of those out there, in lieu of like a short and quirky title? Yeah, I mean, yes, I do think that a lot of reviews kind of bias in favor of something unique. I think awards shows, especially when we are ranking things or what have you, I think people are looking for something original. And I think that that's a pretty normal thing. I don't think the cost of it, especially when you're comparing indies to full-blown games, I mean, those indies are like $10. $20. It's not that much money. So yeah, I think that your entire premise is broken, basically. Because that's something, the idea, hey, I'm getting video games for free, is something that's real cool for about 6 months. And if you can't get past that, you're not going to last in this line of work. It's just something that happens. And as someone who was perpetually looking for new games and playing new games any way I could get my hands on them, I have just continued doing that. And so at the end of the day, it just really doesn't matter. So yeah, I think that entire premise is sort of broken. Uh, Richard writes in, he's 43. He's been playing video games for a long time. And now he's wondering if he's done. I work all day and I'm mentally exhausted by the evening. I have an 18-year-old daughter, or 18-month-old daughter, and I'm taking care of my family. Leaves me with about 60 minutes to myself for an evening. By the time I pick up a controller, I'm so tired I can barely concentrate or focus. But I've been thinking that maybe this is a good thing. Like it or not, I am a complete believer in owning physical copies of what I buy. You'll not convince me otherwise. Okay? And the industry has been turning its back on the old guard like me for a long time. As I look behind me, I see shelves packed full of amazing games from every generation, and some only played once or twice. I even have a copy of PsyOps, The Mindgate Conspiracy. Given the never-ending gloomy news about high prices, the greedy anti-consumer policies, and constant layoffs and shuttering of amazing studios, it feels like I'm turning a corner and maybe the light is going out for me on trying to keep up. I've loved video games for so long, but for us old guard, maybe it's time we turn our back. Leave it to the kids, the free-to-play garbage, and the online purchases they can strip you of anytime their license expires. I don't have a question, just a stream of consciousness that I decided to write down. Well, thanks for sending that my way. I don't know, man. You're 43. You're not that old. Like, like you're 43. It's not like you're 70. Sure, dude. I don't know. If gaming is not doing it for you, you can stop anytime you want. Like, no one is holding you down and saying, fucking play the anime horse lady game. You need 10 more pulls. If you sign up for this game today, you get 150 free pulls. Like, no one is beating that into you. But yeah, if new games aren't doing it for you anymore, then sure. You know? There are so many games that come out every day, and so many of those games are designed in a way that appeal to such wide ranges of players. There are so many small games coming out all the time on Steam every single day that are exciting and weird and interesting. It's been fun watching some of that stuff happen and some of the results of that. You know, like, what is it? Mechta Chameleon, which I guess that is how it's pronounced, supposedly, has sold 15 million copies on Steam. I will never get to play it because it is a game about Metcha. I know there's a T in there somewhere. I knew. It is the game about hiding up against walls and painting your figure to make it look like the wall behind you. Oh, matcha like the... No, it's not matcha like the T. Anyway. That's a game I took a long look at and said, oh, this seems kind of fun in a like fucking prop hunt kind of way. And then I looked at it longer and I was like, oh, I'm never going to be able to play this because it's all about coloring things and like making it look like the background and using Photoshop-esque tools to make your character look like that and being colorblind. I can never fucking do that. So, I don't know. Yeah. Moonanaut says, my sister's playing Titanium Court and that looks fucking bananas. Titanium Court is not a game that moved me per se, but it looked cool as fuck. I played a bunch of it and ultimately was like, I like the cut of this game's jib, but I don't think I need to see. I'm not enjoying the moment to moment enough to stick with it. But yeah, I don't know. There's a ton of games, you know, especially if you're someone who likes a lot of old games. Like, I feel like some of that stuff has come back in style to a certain extent. And so you see smaller developers trying to duplicate that style. They're getting it wrong. Don't get me wrong. They're not making accurate PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games. They're making what they thought PlayStation. It's the same reason why like all analog horror is just like these days, the further removed we get from its origins. Like, so much of it is just like, yeah, man, it's got fucking VHS fucking tracking lines on it. Ooh, you know what I mean? But there are so many games coming out all the time. If you can't find anything that moves you, then yeah, stop. No one's keeping you here. No one's twisting your arm and saying you must play video games. You must play new video games. Take the summer. Get way into the series of Mr. Do games. Mr. Do. Mr. Do's Castle. Mr. Do's Wild Ride. Do Run Run. Neo Mr. Do. Perhaps get into the scary stuff. The bootlegs. Like Mr. Do's Nightmare. From Crazy Ivan. Which does not have retro achievements. Unfortunately. Yeah, I think that, there's so much happening right now that if you can't find anything that appeals to you, and again, it sounds like, you got a lot going on. You sound like you only have an hour a day to play, and with your daughter being as young, I get it, man. It's hard. Last night, all the kids got to bed, and I came out here and sat out here for, the 4 or 5 hours that I sit out here every night. And I was just so blown away by the scope and the depth of the layoffs that I've read through, a lot of that stuff, and then just fucking sat here like basically staring into space. Hot Dad was streaming. I had that on, but we could barely pay attention to it. I was just like, fuck. Sometimes nights are going like that. But yeah, I think that, you see people kind of go through this a lot, and they make it a struggle, and I don't think it really has to be. If you're not getting anything out of gaming, if you're really not feeling it, like you said, you got shelves full of old games. You could just get into that stuff. You could become one of those guys. Just try not to become one of those guys, if you know what I mean. Go ahead and play old games, but don't become one of the fucking knuckleheads. One of the old game knuckleheads, of which there are an increasing number. Yeah, I don't know. Dip into retro achievements. That's a lot of fun. I've been splitting my time between old games and new games. I'll tell you, man, what's been a really nice buffer for me for my sanity, with just how grim a lot of the news has been, has been playing and ranking Nintendo 64 games, as I am doing every Friday around these parts. And that has been, we've only done 2 of those so far. This Friday we will return to the N64. That has been a great deal of fun. And in an entirely different way than ranking 8-bit Nintendo games was fun. But filling a similar gap. Originally, it's funny, man. When I originally said, well, I'm going to devote Fridays to old games. At first, I was like, shit, man, there's going to be a bunch of newer games that I miss out on covering. And, is that a responsible thing to do? And, what should I, how should I really focus on this stuff? But people have really enjoyed that stuff, and people have showed up for it, which has made it, which has been great as well. And with the fucking absolute shit show of everything around us, it has actually been a very wonderful experience of going back and revisiting some of these games, some of which I reviewed, some of which I've never played, and all of that. And so that has been really, again, really, like, people comment on the video and be like, oh, it seems like you hate all these games. Why are you doing this to yourself? I was like, dude, I'm having a fucking amazing time. Like, that doesn't mean the games are good, but I am having an amazing time doing this. Like, it's really been wonderful. And sometimes it's more fun when the games are fucking bad. because it's been interesting to revisit a lot of that stuff and kind of see like what is up with this, and so yeah, I don't know, man. I think there are a lot of great reasons to play old games. There are still a lot of great reasons to play new games. There are fewer big AAA games. That's, for me, that's been kind of the thing I've been come to terms with, because, like all those years I spent reviewing games, the industry was big in a different way. Smaller dollars wise, obviously, but there were more publishers putting out more kind of what we think of as like these top tier games. Because everything came out in the exact same fashion. Everything was on a disc, and so everything was equal. It was just like all these games are, in a lot of cases, the same amount of money. You're like, okay, let's review these fucking games, man. And so every week there was something like that to be like, I don't know if this game might suck, but I'm going to play it and review it, and I'm going to have I enjoy doing that because I enjoy my job and all of that. And so like the transition away from that, because there are fewer of those companies, obviously they take much longer to make each individual game, and so we wait years and years for the next fucking Halo or whatever. Like, those moments of like those top games are harder to come by these days. And so yeah, if you're really focused on the top tier stuff, this industry feels very different than it did. I mean, whatever, no matter what your focus is, it is very different. So yeah, I don't know. It's I still try to keep up with new games, and I don't talk about all of them here on the podcast, and I don't put up videos of all of them. Because frankly, like, they were not getting watched very often, and that's kind of it gets back to a lot of the unfortunate nature of discoverability of games, and like there are a lot of great indie games out there, but sometimes the audience doesn't show up for that sort of stuff, and so I try to focus on games that I like, kind of like believe in or whatever. And it's like, okay, like maybe not a lot of people will see this, but the right people will see this, and I need more people to know about this thing. Like Mini Shoot Adventures was a good example of one of those, of just like, man, this game's like fucking incredible. Or something as ridiculous as Goblin America. Like, people should see that thing. It's crazy. I've been playing, I didn't really talk about it because I only played like 20 minutes of it last night, but Desolation Seed came out. And if you like fucked up, weird, bad games that are bad on purpose and weird on purpose, that is certainly one of those. And so yeah, I don't know, man. It's a disaster a la Cruelty Squad, but a much slower and more disastrous fucking thing. It's just slow moving, just foggy mess. It's a disaster. Desolation Seed. You should go look at it. I don't know that I'll play it tomorrow because it's a real fucking. I might. I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do tomorrow. I'll figure that out tomorrow. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Like, if keeping up with modern games, whether be they big or small, is not doing it for you, then yeah, no one is forcing you to, and there are a trillion different ways to experience old video games. You could even get a fucking Ayn Thor and put Mr. Do on both screens. Put different Mr. Do's on each screen. The world is your oyster. So do your thing. Josh from Georgia writes in with another burning question about modern video games. Lately, I find myself thinking of the 3DO for some reason. And I remember it being the coolest looking thing in all the ads I would see in game magazines at the time. I wanted one so bad, but I remember them being kind of expensive and could never imagine asking for one from my parents. Of course, looking back, it wasn't exactly the future of gaming, but I'm wondering if you have any good stories about coverage and vibes around it, and if there were any redeeming qualities for the system. So the 3DO kind of came out in a weird pocket where, as it was coming out, I was still working for a magazine, and then that magazine went under, and then I was completely unemployed for all of 1995, most of 1995, and most of 1996, and then started at GameSpot in 96. Started freelancing for them in the summer or whatever. So, like, in a lot of ways, that was the relevant portion of the 3DO's run. Was at a point when I was not really writing about games. But yeah, I went to CES and E3 and all that stuff. I played Way of the Warrior at a trade show before it came out, and it was funny. And we were like, oh, this thing looks cool. It's it's digitized characters like Mortal Kombat, but it also has this ripping fucking soundtrack. And that made it kind of exciting, and eventually would lead to me briefly becoming a White Zombie fan. But then you got your hands on it, and you're like, this is terrible. This plays like shit. And I'm standing there at this little kiosk that Naughty Dog is running, and all of the founders of Naughty Dog that now you think of in a much different context than you did then are standing around watching people play Way of the Warrior and talking to them about it. And I was talking to Jason Rubin, this is years ago now, but I remember I told him, like, oh yeah, I was there playing Way of the Warrior at that thing, and he's like, oh dude, that's fucking awesome, it was so crazy back then, and all that sort of stuff. That was maybe the only time I saw a 3DO game and went like, the rest of them were kind of a mess, and the system was too expensive. And so a lot of that stuff was just it was a very difficult sell. It was a very hard sell. 3DO sent us a 3DO at the magazine I worked for that I failed to steal when they laid us all off. God damn it. And so we were getting ready, like, I think, we reviewed like The Horde and some of the other stuff in the magazine. There were a handful of 3DO games that did get reviews. But they were trying to pitch it as this multimedia future device, like that. In the CDI, the pitches were very similar. The 3DO was just a more capable video game machine than the CDI was, and the 3DO was something like $700, or it was way too much fucking money. When you compare it to the Super Nintendo, which ran games better, was way more fun to play, ran games at a reasonable frame rate, for less than half the price. And so the 3DO was just dead in the water, dude. It was just like, this is crazy. It was very hard to look at 3DO and see it as like the potential future of gaming. It was very easy to look at it and go, these people are full of shit. They're trying to convince us this is the future of gaming, but they are fucking liars. Like, they're trying to use FMV, and they're trying to do all these fucking smoke and mirrors, Dragon's Lair bullshit. I didn't fall for it when it was Laserdisc games. I sure as shit am not going to fall for it now. That's my feeling about the 3DO, basically. But, there were quote-unquote real video games on the 3DO. There were polygonal... you had Madden, you had the stuff that Crystal Dynamics was doing, your Off-World Interceptors, and whatever the fucking racing game was. You had Road Rash, you had Need for Speed. Like, there was stuff. But like, again, the speed of those games, the frame rate of those games, the smoothness of those games was non-existent. And so Need for Speed on the 3DO just felt like shit. Like, this is a bad driving game. This does not feel good to play. I think it's funny that the guy comes in and talks to me and gives me shit when I lose the race. But Jesus, I don't want to fucking touch this thing because these games feel bad to play. And so that combined with the price was just a non-starter. You had you had adults, because I was, I was 19 at the time, 19, 20. You had older adults, business guys in suits that were trying to convince you that this was the wave of the future and this is how it was going. And Trip Hawkins was one of them, and the slickest amongst them. But as someone who, was keeping it real, it was very easy to look at this shit and go, you people are fucking high. You people are out of your fucking minds. This stuff is a joke. Like, you are crazy if you think this is going to get over. And that's how I felt about it then. Like, the 3DO was... I have much more respect for the 3DO now than I did then, I'll say. Because revisiting it now, there are interesting games like Immersionary, which is a fucking fascinating video game. Hero Delic says, what about the hit game Soccer Kid? So, not a little bit around this time, maybe a little bit before this, Glenn, who you may know from Game Boys to Men, who I think we might do some rapping. I don't know. Anyway, Glenn worked for Crystal Dynamics, or no, I'm sorry, he worked for Spectrum Holobyte for a brief period of time. And was doing some stuff over there, and they were starting to pick up some games and localize them. They were like getting into the publishing, like the translation and publishing end of console gaming, and they took a long look at Soccer Kid. And so I remember Glenn having a fucking EEPROM, like a build of Soccer Kid, and us sitting around and playing it and going like, yeah, no, this is neat, but I don't know. And being very iffy on it, and they ended up passing on it. Yeah, I don't know. It was not a great game at the time. It just didn't feel like it, did not feel like it was going to be some big top tier platformer or whatever. So I don't know. I may have been minorly responsible for that publisher passing on publishing Soccer Kid. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. The 3DO, my favorite Trip Hawkins story, and I think other people got letters like GamePro. There's a famous letter that GamePro got sent around reviews of Portal Runner, where Trip Hawkins makes some vague allusions to withholding advertising, because it just doesn't seem like, I know you guys believe in the future of video games the same way we do, and I just, if you don't, here, I actually dug up this email. It was sent a couple of weeks ago. Brewy8 sent it in, I guess. But this is an email that was sent to and maybe even a physical mail, but I don't know if I'll read this whole thing. If you haven't heard this is Trip Hawkins writing to GamePro to complain about their review of Portal Runner. And then I have a similar story about our review of Portal Runner. Was it my review of Portal Runner? Did I review Portal Runner? Let me check. I don't think this was my review. No, Miguel Lopez wrote that. 6.7. Anyway, this is the letter sent to John Rousseau of GamePro by Trip Hawkins. Hello, John. We at 3DO were very discouraged by the slam job on Portal Runner. I would hope you can recognize that I do not love all of my children equally and can be objective about both good and bad features in a game, as well as games that are of quality and those that are not. I do not send messages like this to you after every review, but this happens to be a game that I have played all the way through and have beaten on all difficulty levels, and I know the game intimately. Ugh. I have also seen the profound positive effect this game has had on my children. This sort of thing is really tragic because your online review excerpt was the first public review of Portal Runner, and it set the tone by telling the hardcore what to think. GamePro speaks to the heart. Yeah, they speak to the hardcore. It closed minds that it could have opened, and even though your reviewer is hardly an authority on either games in general or Portal Runner specifically, his voice will be heard louder and taken more seriously than others. It's not right and it's not fair. In any case, your reviewer blew it on this one, and we are reevaluating our relationship with GamePro as a result. I think it is unprofessional of a reviewer to assume he represents all his readers and all market segments and can therefore dismiss a game based purely on his personal experience of a game. particularly when he has no context about the goals and target audience of the game publisher. The audience for games no longer consists of one iconic block of angry young men who cannot get a date on Saturday night. Reviewers who don't consult with the game publisher about the intended audience and don't attempt to position a game in terms of who might like it and who might not like it are unprofessional. This is some grade A fucking horse shit, man. Oh my God. Okay. I furthermore propose as a solution the idea that you assign a journalist during the preview stage of a game and provide professional follow-through by having that same journalist write the review. At GameSpot, we had a policy specifically to prevent that exact thing. The previews, and you would not write the preview and the review because, of course, they would want that. Jesus Christ, Trip. In the case of Portal Runner, we had some ambition to reach a wider audience. We wanted to include boys, girls, women, and casual gaming men. I know from firsthand experience that Portal Runner is a hit with all those market segments. Many of your readers are in those segments, but your reviewers are not. Meanwhile, I personally think we made a game that hardcore adult male gamers would enjoy, but I can understand that some of them would reject it in the same way that some adults reject Shrek or Beethoven. Does he mean the movie Beethoven? But personally, I think that really means there is something wrong with a man like that, not with Portal Runner. If you disagree with me, you do so at your own peril. The industry is in a malaise. As you know, most game publishers are losing money and have cut back on advertising. Many magazines and webzines have perished. What seems needless to me is the often overly negative tone that gaming editorial makes. Most of you have editorial staffs that are dominated by angry young men that are poorly trained and represent a narrow and anarchistic element of the world's population. They have a negative attitude and are looking for what's wrong with something instead of looking for what is right and who might like it. It reminds me of boys at a junior high dance. With their fragile egos, they stay on the sideline and say the band sucks, the girls are ugly, and that those brave enough to dance are lousy dancers. Your reviewers have no idea how to make a great game. None of them have ever made one, but they sure have fun telling us in a nasty tone how inferior we are to them. This keeps going. We're like halfway through. I truly find it astonishing that magazines like yours seem willing to slit your own throats on occasions like this. Sorry. It's in a weird font. You have so much more to gain if you were enthusiasts for gaming and try to find the audience for a new game. You're so much better off if you do not bite the hand that feeds you, and do not patronize me by telling me the reader is the customer. Your real customer is the one who pays you your revenue, and it is game industry advertisers. If you need to be able to be constantly negative, you need to accept that you are a parasite that is killing its host. In God's millions of years, he has not created nor evolved a creature that would have such a stupid strategy for survival. But it is a common attitude among game magazines, despite the evidence all around them, that it drives many of them into bankruptcy. You've been around long enough to know that this is true, but you have not adapted your publication. I should mention in passing that 3DO has been one of your largest advertisers. Effective immediately, we are going to have to cut that back. If a consumer sees a bad editorial and a positive ad, they are going to assume the ad is biased. What is frustrating is that often it is the other way around. Yeah, that's right. The ads aren't... Jesus. Trip. That's right. The ads aren't biased. The editorial is. The ads aren't biased. The ad designed to... Amazing. Okay. But to make matters worse, they will think the advertiser is stupid, and it will reinforce their confidence that the editorial must be accurate, because it is also saying the game publisher is stupid. I don't go for that. In addition, it makes far more sense to give financial support to publications that are more professional and more fair. There are only so many bucks to go around. In conclusion, I think you owe us one because you took us by surprise and threw our review to a wolf. And you accepted his word as God without even checking in with a major advertiser or wondering about how it makes you look to rip a game you chose to put on a recent cover. I think we share a common vision, which is to get more people to play games and appreciate what a great thing it is to be at play. I know you are proud of the circulation increase of GamePro. We both are doing things to try to expand the audience for gaming. Unfortunately, our efforts to expand beyond the angry young hardcore are being counteracted by your angry young reviewers who don't share either my vision or yours. Sincerely, Trip. So my version of this interaction was much shorter. And I don't have the emails, or I don't have anything, but Vince Brody, who was one of the founders of GameSpot, great guy. He was in charge of editorial at the time when that game came out. He was in charge of everything. I mean, he was in charge of everything at that point. He was in charge of GameSpot. He was the general manager or whatever by then. He came out of his office. This is when we were on Townsend Street. We were in the same building as Sega, sitting in these weird wooden cubicles. And I believe this would have been after they laid off all of CNET Game Center. But we were part of CNET by then, I believe. Anyway, maybe that would come later. Anyway, regardless of that. As I said, Miguel Lopez reviewed it for GameSpot, gave it a 6.7. Vince comes out of his office, kind of a smile on his face. Says, "Hey, it's got off the phone, Trip Hawkins. He's really mad about that Portal Runner review." Like, "Oh yeah? Yeah, it's something that we're not respecting the creation, what do you understand, we're not we're not giving his game a fair shake. We're not doing this, we're doing that." And like, "Oh, really? Huh. So yeah, just thought I'd let you know." Okay. And that was it. And I guess I think he sent emails and followed up with phone calls and all this other stuff. And because he's Trip Hawkins, he can get on the phone with people. He's still, he was something of a name, but it was like he just kind of came out and said, "Hey, here's what happened. Anyway, keep it up." And that was pretty funny. This is a long, ridiculous email or mail, whatever, a letter. I don't know. Probably an email. But yes, that Trip Hawkins really believed in Portal Runner. And to be fair, you want the guy that's running your company to really believe in the games you're publishing, right? I mean, good on him for trying to defend what they were making. That doesn't make the reviews any less right or wrong or whatever, but yeah, I guess yes, the Portal Runner apparently came out on 9/11. So it was only the second worst thing to happen back in there and to that now. But I don't remember how 9/11 factored into this set of events here. So I don't know. Our review may have the date on the review. GameSpot's date on reviews is really broken. It says September 12th, 2001. Big day. But yeah, we give it a 6.7, and he says, hey, it's apparent that more time was spent developing it than most of the publisher's previous fare, and the end result is largely pleasing. Many will be surprised that a game set in the Army Men universe actually looks and plays well, which is a different kind of burn, honestly. But the review is not harshly negative. It's a 6.7, and it's about right. It's like, yeah, this game, you could do worse. than this. Which is kind of how I remember Portal Runner, as being like, eh. So we sent that, Soulwax asked, so we sent that email after 9/11. Yeah, I guess so. I guess it would have had to have been. I guess it would have had to have been after 9/11 that he sent out emails about Portal Runner. Yeah, I guess so, man. You know, I interpreted that, and I've heard about the GamePro. I think I've seen that GamePro email before. But I don't think I've ever read it in full. My memory of this, I mean, this is 2001. 3DO had obviously transitioned into being a publisher, and largely I feel like the games that 3DO published were not great games. You know? And so I don't really, you know, when did the company kind of stop? When did they give up and stop publishing games here? 2003. Yeah, so they went into, yeah, it sounds like in 2003 or so is when they kind of stopped and went bankrupt, or I guess there was an SEC investigation into the accounting practices. Anyway, but there was, okay, December 2002 was a net loss. They filed for bankruptcy May 2003. So this was 2001. But I remember feeling like 3DO was maybe on the ropes a little bit, that Portal Runner was something they were trying to make a big deal. I remember them really trying to, like, promoting Portal Runner and trying to get it in front of people and all of that, and just being like, this game is not great. I mean, okay, sure. But they were putting the lady that was in it on covers, and yeah, I mean, apparently on the cover of GamePro, but they were trying to get the word out about this thing and trying to really get behind it. And in some ways, I wonder if it was like their last best shot at a game. And when that didn't hit, Trip went crazy. High Heat Baseball was pretty good. That was kind of the only thing that they were really known for, was like they made a solid baseball game. And that people did kind of like High Heat. I don't know that it was the best baseball game on the market at the time, but it was reasonably well regarded. And Army Men, I remember, like when Army Men started coming out on console, I remember that being not great. Army Men Air Attack was awesome, but mostly just because it said Chinook. That was really all it had going for it. Chinook. Huey! But also it was a pretty decent knockoff of Desert Strike. And, you know, but you had stuff like Sarge's Heroes and a lot of this other stuff. Like, I just remember, like, most of the 3DO catalog being just kind of fucking shitty. You know? Like, yeah, some people liked Battle Tanks or whatever, but yeah, I remember it being a highly suspect lineup of games. And then High Heat Baseball. They were like, well, at least High Heat's all right. So for this to happen in 2001 and then they go under mid 2003, like, that's very believable. You know, they were doing what they could to try to survive, I suppose. And I'd have to look at their lineup post Portal Runner, but I wonder if Portal Runner was literally their last best shot at like a quote unquote big game, and it just didn't pull it off. I don't know. I remember playing a little bit of it back then. Right, 3DO had the Might and Magic IP and did kind of jack fuck with it. World Destruction League. Yeah, man. Yeah, 3DO. I have a Walkman, like a little portable cassette player with a built-in radio that has the 3DO logo on it, because I think they sent it out like alongside High Heat Baseball, and they were like, it's got a radio in it so you can listen to baseball games, or, you know, whatever the justification was for just like, you know, here's this dumb thing we sent out. I'm like, yeah, okay. I think I still have that somewhere. But yeah, that's going to do it for emails. Thanks to everybody who wrote in, and thanks to Trip Hawkins for sending that email to GamePro all those years ago. Yeah, I mean, you got to feel for him to a certain extent. I mean, you know, he's a guy at the top of a struggling company. He's trying to fucking make it happen. You know, this is a game that they got behind and probably believed in, and then the reviews hit, and they're like, ah, shit. You know, like I can't. That's always the thing, man. It's perfectly normal and justifiable for someone in his position to send an email like that, to pick up the phone and call and be like, we're gonna pull ads, or you know, like something like that. You just go like, yeah, I guess, man. Like if that's the pressure you want to try to apply, it is on the side of the publication to not fucking fall for it and not compromise their integrity over a threat such as that. Because when that happens, that's when things go bad. In an ideal scenario, yes, Sarduce says PR should have definitely talked him down. I don't think Trip Hawkins was talking to PR before he sent these. And what are they going to say? They're going to say, we don't think this is a good idea. And he's going to say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Trip Hawkins. So yeah, like, you know, it's not the first time. Well, I mean, it's certainly not the first time, and it's definitely not the last that, you know, a publication was threatened to have advertising pulled over review coverage, right? And again, that's, yeah, if they feel like that's something they want to do, then I guess, man, like, I think the thing I would say, he says like, oh, you don't want to go out of business. It's hard out there. Publications are going under. I think my response to that is, and always has been, if this publication can only stay afloat by compromising its integrity, it should be shut the fuck down. It has no right to exist. It has no, you know, there's no, if the only way to survive is to compromise the legacy and ruin your integrity, then that's that, man. Wrap it up. You know? The reality of that is brutal, but that's, I don't know. I think that's how you have to fucking operate. Like, if those lines get crossed, you have to be fucking like, okay, we got to go. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. I'll be back tomorrow with some stuff. On Friday, we'll rank some 64-bit Nintendo games. So come on back for that for sure. And I don't know, tomorrow we'll see if there's any more fallout from everything, you know, from any of these layoffs or any of this other stuff. Like, it just feels like these situations are, you know, the stories are developing, as they say. So come on back. We'll catch up on any of that if there's anything. If not, I don't know, we'll hang out. We'll do fucking whatever. I don't know. Maybe we'll play some Desolation Seed. Maybe we'll play some Assassin's Creed. I think that'll be out by then, right? I do want to see this Doom DLC, as depressing as that is, to have shipped today after all the fucking... God damn it, man. God damn it, man. All right, we'll be back next week. Have a good one.